After discovering my wife's cheating on YouTube, I confronted her, tested our kids' DNA, and divorced. I stayed up until 10 p.m. watching YouTube on my laptop with a queue of clips ready to play. One featured my favorite basketball player, Larry Big Al Johnson, making an impressive long-range shot. I've known Big Al since college, where he was a star player. After turning pro, he joined the Visor, my hometown team in Virginia. Now retired, he hosts shows on Wiz TV. I watched his videos for nostalgia. One unexpected clip showed him dancing carnally with a beautiful blonde at a Miami club, my wife. The clip, just published, showed them kissing passionately. When I called Lee, she didn't answer. She was supposed to be at a Miami business meeting with our friend Bart Kovat. I called Bart for information. He confirmed they spent 3 days together and suspected they were involved romantically. Apologies were exchanged, and plans were made to confront Lee. Bart suggested she might still be at the hotel, just in a different room. He also mentioned that Big Al lived nearby. I don't want to discuss this with her. If she asks, I'll explain. Fair enough, talk to you later. Lee and I first met in college during our 20s. It was in our penultimate year during math class. Walking in, I noticed her drawing in her notebook, surrounded by shy, nerdy guys. I decided to sit next to her. She joked about the lack of competition, and we hit it off. I'm not a typical nerd, 1.73 meters tall, 68 kilograms, with brown eyes and hair. She seemed intrigued by my confidence. I introduced myself as Lee Martin. She jokingly remarked we wouldn't need to change monograms if we married. We laughed as we headed to the student union. Lee was a stunning 6-foot-tall blonde with green eyes, an average figure, and a smile that captivated me. I said, "You must have been surprised when none of the guys in class sat next to you." "Thank you, I was surprised. Usually I have to fend off guys. You exploited my insecurities and now I can't diss you. I have another lesson in 20 minutes, but I'd like to invite you to dinner maybe tonight. Since we're in the same class, we should get to know each other better." "No dinner, sorry. I have a boyfriend and he won't like it." I had to try. "Well, I hope to see you again." "Me too, I like you. At least we'll see each other in class." We met in class twice a week, tackling the tough subject together. One day, I asked her about a problem, and she explained everything. After class, I asked about her experience with the course. "No, I'm good at math. And you?" "I need it for my chemistry major, but I struggle. Maybe you could give me some advice." "What is this, a joke? I have a boyfriend." "No, I respect that. I just need help. We can meet at a diner and go over subjects as if you were my tutor." "Fine, diner at 4? "Agreed." During our diner meetings, I got to know Lee much better. We hit it off, discussing topics beyond mathematics. One day, a large guy approached our table where our books lay. Lee introduced him as Rashad, her boyfriend. We shook hands. Rashad was a medium-built black man, around 5 feet 8 inches and 100 kilograms. We closed our math books, and Rashad asked why I was taking the class with Lee and the nerds. I explained I needed it for my chemistry major and programming. We then discussed why certain majors required unrelated courses. Rashad revealed his interest in physical training, aiming to become a high school teacher or pursue hockey professionally. Lee aimed for a business career, drawn to the idea of making money. As the semester progressed, I saw more of Lee. I invited her and Rashad to dinner at my off-campus apartment, along with Rashad's neighbor Stephanie. Dinner went well, with fish stew, spinach salad, and dessert. Lee and Rashad left after playing bridge, surprisingly enjoying the game. Lee and I won, bonding over her unique bidding system. Stephanie stayed the night, but we both understood our relationship was purely physical, as she had a boyfriend back home. That evening proved pivotal when Lee invited me to a backup bridge tournament at the Army baseball field. I agreed, unaware of the unfolding drama. 2 days after our dinner, I spotted Stephanie and Rashad entering our building together. Intrigued, I followed them to Stephanie's floor, unsure what to do. I observed from my room. Hours later, Rashad emerged, prompting me to visit Stephanie. She seemed flustered, but confessed she felt no regret. We discussed the situation, agreeing to let things cool off for a while to assess our feelings. The bridge tournament was enjoyable, though the revelation about Rashad and Stephanie lingered. Lee asked why I hadn't informed her. I explained Rashad hadn't made a decision. She understood. Later, she expressed a desire to come to my place, which I eagerly accepted. In the heat of the moment, passion overtook us. Lee's arousal matched mine, resulting in intense satisfaction. Despite my initial doubts, the connection between us felt undeniable. We shared in a carnal moment, reaffirming our compatibility. She followed me. "Shower?" she asked in a sultry voice. We shared a carnal shower against the smooth wall before washing up and returning to bed, drifting off to sleep. In the morning, I rose and brushed my teeth. Lee joined me, and I offered her a spare toothbrush. After freshening up, we tended to my morning arousal. During breakfast, Lee asked, "Am I as good as Stephanie? Am I as good as she was?" We locked eyes before she grinned. "Yoon's bigger, but you're better. Steph is good, but you're fantastic." From then on, we were inseparable. Lee practically moved in with me despite Rashad's objections. He eventually found another partner and frequently visited Stephanie during his senior year. Big Al moved into our building on the 4th floor. Sometimes I saw him with Stephanie, though they never lived together. We exchanged pleasantries until Steph invited us over for dessert one day, where Big Al was also present. We had a pleasant evening, though afterward, we were no longer invited. Lee and I tied the knot at 20, fresh out of college. I landed a job as a programmer at the Pen while Lee worked in advertising, aiming to influence government decisions. I inherited a house near work from my grandfather, which we moved into after the lease expired. With 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a converted garage, and a finished basement, there was work to be done, which I tackled with the help of a friend from high school who ran a construction business. Lee became pregnant, and at 22, we welcomed twin daughters, Betsy and Linda. While they were not identical, they certainly kept us on our toes. Lee took a year off, and I scaled back my work to care for the twins. Eventually, I transitioned to contractor status, allowing me to work from home while Lee returned to part-time work. As the girls grew, Lee resumed full-time work while I balanced my contracting gigs with developing 2 potentially profitable systems. Lee's career thrived, and by the time the girls entered primary school at 13, we were financially stable. At 35, I stayed active with running and table tennis, both of which kept me in good shape. Despite being together for 15 years, our bed life remained enjoyable, though Lee seemed to question its vitality before the revelation about Big Al. I searched up Big Al's address, finding it about 3 miles north of our place. I pondered whether what I witnessed in Miami was recent or if it had been ongoing for some time. Other questions nagged at me as well. The day after I showed the girls the YouTube video, I requested DNA swabs from them and took one myself. It was Friday, and despite their need to attend school for tests and group sessions, I felt compelled to safeguard them from potential schoolyard confrontations. At 10, Lee rang. Seeing her name on the caller ID, I let it divert to voicemail. "Marty, please pick up," she pleaded. "Marty, I love you. I made a mistake. I'll be back this afternoon. Oh, damn." Her voice trailed off, punctuated by sobs. One of the upgrades I made to the house was installing an electronic entry system, and I changed the code. The converted garage sat unused but furnished, so I relocated Lee's belongings there, feeling it necessary. Both my mother and Lee reached out, eager to know my plans. Uncertain myself, I could only convey as much. So I accessed Lee's Gmail account, scrolling through a month's worth of emails, both archived and current. Despite checking the trash folder, there was no correspondence with Big Al. A few messages pertained to work and the conference, with a couple offering some vague insights. But they were solely from a colleague attending the Miami event. Lee's flight was due to arrive at noon, ignoring her calls. I enlisted a friend to monitor the airport, observing who disembarked from the plane. In the ensuing dynamics, he spotted Lee exiting with her workmates, glancing around. He recorded a video on his phone, then proceeded to fetch her luggage. Remaining at the exit 5 minutes after others had deplaned, Big Al emerged. He, too, surveyed the area before heading to baggage claim. My friend trailed him while Lee waited for a taxi. Big Al approached her, speaking, but she shook her head, declining. A taxi pulled up, and the dispatcher ushered them both inside. My friend sent me a video. 20 minutes later, the taxi pulled up at the house, but only Lee emerged, visibly flustered. Discovering her access code didn't work, she knocked and rang the bell. I opened the door to find her in tears. "I'm so sorry, Marty. I never realized how much of a mess this would become," she sobbed. "You don't belong here, Lee. Your belongings are in the garage until you find somewhere else. Maybe Al's house would suit you better." "Oh, Marty, there's nothing between us. I love you. You publicly humiliated me, made me a joke. Our daughter's at school. Who knows what they're dealing with? You're despicable. Get out of my sight." Her expression fell as she staggered away, eventually sitting on a chair in the yard, crying. Mrs. Cunningham, our neighbor, came out and comforted her. Lee eventually went to her house. I called Lee's mother, informing her that Lee was nearby and needed support. Ellen, her mother, wasn't very responsive, but agreed to come in an hour. I sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee, unable to envision what the future held. The night prior, I contacted a lawyer I knew, who referred me to family law attorney Joan Ellis. I scheduled an appointment for the following Monday. About 30 minutes later, Miss Ellis returned my call. Mr. Martin, this is Joan Ellis. You've scheduled an appointment for Monday regarding your wife and the basketball player? Yes. How did you know? The video doesn't identify her. Oh, she is. The TV reporter found out. Big Al is making headlines, especially in the gossip columns. I figured there was no use delaying until Monday. Can you come tomorrow morning, say at 10? Yes, at 10. Please provide me with a brief overview of your relationship with your wife and with Mr. Johnson, if you're acquainted. I'll also need financial statements, if available. After wrapping up our conversation, she cautioned me against impulsive actions. As I hung up, the phone rang again. I answered automatically. It was Big Al. I'm calling to try and apologize to you. Freak you. I'll do everything in my power to make your life miserable, idiot. Wow, it's not just me. Not just me, but her too. It just happened. I was happily married to her before she went to Miami. We have 2 kids. You're a complete prick. If you see me, run. I said it calmly, without yelling. There was no hint of emotion. There was a long pause on the other end. Then he hung up, but now I had his number. I accessed our phone account, checked the call log from Lee's phone, noting Al's number. I only saw him after her arrival in Miami. Also twice, I couldn't access today's calls. I assumed their meeting in Miami was unplanned. Checking the Wiz schedule, they had an afternoon game in Miami on Wednesday. Big Al was the MC, so he was there on business. The doorbell chimed and I peeked out to see my parents and in-laws. Lee was nowhere to be found. I ushered them in and offered drinks, which they declined before taking seats. Standing at the entrance to the living room, I addressed my mom, Lacey, who responded first. We had a brief powwow on the street. We wanted to hear your thoughts, she began. I believe I let out a quiet, yet distinct sob, straightening up as I looked at my mother. I guess she sensed my despair at that moment. Later, she mentioned that my gaze conveyed such devastation, melancholy, and pain that she couldn't fathom how anything could be reconciled. My dad inquired, "Is there a chance you could talk to Lee?" She asked when we were there. For what? She won't have anything to say. She shattered our family, and it wasn't just one night. 3. She didn't even try to conceal it from her TO workers, and now the whole world knows, I replied bitterly. Ellen interjected, I know she messed up, Marty, big time, and she acknowledges that. But you have daughters and you've loved each other for years. There's a lot to salvage if you can. I don't see her as my wife anymore, and I never will. She's the mother of my kids, and that's it, I asserted. You're hurting right now. Your pride took a blow. You need to get past it. Your marriage can't end over a few days, Ellen reasoned. Ellen, I respect and care for you, but your daughter has caused irreparable injury. Please don't push for reconciliation. It's not happening, I insisted. She raised her hands in surrender, and I continued. You all need to think about what life will look like post-divorce or when it's finalized. My mother burst into tears. Just give it a few days, Marty, just a few. Your dad and I can take the kids for the weekend. Let's take them to the lake. I agreed, and right then, the girls got off the bus. They raced to the door, but with the code changed, they had to knock. They were surprised to see their grandparents and eager to share about their day. It wasn't all bad. Betsy mentioned her friend Sharon Davis, who had asked about the video. Linda didn't know much, and I filled them in. We'll talk about it later, I reassured them. They weren't too upset. Linda asked about her mother, and Ellen explained she was next door. The girls were worried but keen to see Lee. We sent them off to pack. Though I was against them seeing her, the others felt it necessary. Once their bags were packed, Ellen fetched Lee, and they waited on the porch with their grandparents. Lee and Ellen approached. The girls didn't rush to her, they simply waited. From my bedroom window on the second floor, I could see and hear everything. Lee knelt before the girls, and they embraced. Mom, Linda queried, what did you do? How could you be with that guy? Her last words came out amid sobs. I made a terrible mistake. I need to understand why. But I still love you girls and your dad very much, Lee responded. Betsy, the tougher of the two, was unimpressed. If you loved Dad, you wouldn't have done this. You let it all happen on video. How could you? Tears streamed down her face now. Lee began to cry. I'm so sorry. It was a terrible mistake, Lee hugged Linda, but Betsy pushed her away. Lee stood up and fled to her father's car. My parents ushered the girls into their van, and everyone went their separate ways. I remained seated on my bed, stunned and sorrowful. Then rage consumed me. Anger surged through my veins. I thrashed and screamed. Finally, I descended to the basement and began pounding on the punching bag, each blow directed at Larry or Lee. Exhausted, my hands were red and raw. I resolved that they both deserved suffering no matter what. After tending to my injured hands, I had a nightcap and retired to bed. Sleep eluded me for a while, but eventually it claimed me. The next morning I went for an intense, lengthy run. Then I gathered my financial documents and headed to the lawyer's office. Joan Ellis turned out to be a woman in her 40s, slender with dark hair and eyes, dressed casually in jeans and a sweatshirt. We exchanged greetings and proceeded to the conference room. "I'm a bit underdressed, sorry. It's Saturday and I did some yard work," she apologized. "No problem. You look great," I reassured her. She smiled and led the way. I began, "Miss Ellis, I want to understand my options for divorcing my wife. I can outline them for you. But are you certain you want a divorce? It's a difficult path, especially with 2 children, right?" she inquired. "Yes, the twins are 13, and I'd like to seek custody," I confirmed. "Let's circle back to whether you truly want to end your marriage. Has something like the Miami incident happened before, or is this a one-time occurrence?" she probed. "I don't think she strayed before, but I can't say for certain," I admitted. "So if it's true, you can't reconcile with it," she summarized. "No," I replied firmly, without further elaboration. "All right, let's talk finances," she suggested. We delved into each other's earnings and responsibilities concerning the children. Joan was pleased to discover that the house was solely mine, acquired before marriage, and that the children had lived there their entire lives. She also noted that my role as a stay-at-home parent and our compatible work schedules could sway custody in my favor. However, she cautioned that nothing was guaranteed. I earned roughly the same as Lee, but my income was less stable, I informed her. Joan believed that neither of us would likely owe child support. "The non-custodial parent typically pays child support," she clarified. "I'm curious how soon we can initiate divorce proceedings," I inquired. "We could have the documents prepared and submitted within a week," Joan proposed. "I suggest waiting longer. People can change their minds, and you may be required to undergo counseling. Is there a way to avoid that?" "I'd prefer not to have any direct conversations with her," I expressed. "You will need to have these discussions, but we can keep them to a minimum," Joan assured. "I noticed your hands are bandaged." "What happened?" she inquired. "I got a bit upset last night and took it out on a punching bag. Forgot my gloves," I explained. "Well, at least you didn't visit Mr. Johnson or your wife. Speaking of which, is there a way to sue him for this?" "He should be held accountable," I remarked. "Unfortunately, in this state, there's no legal recourse for infidelity or alienation of affection. It used to be the case, but not anymore. I also checked Florida law, and there's no option there either." "He's off the hook for now," Joan informed me. My tone remained steady, which seemed to unsettle Joan. "Let me see what I can do. Just refrain from any violence, please," she requested. No promises. That guy needs to pay. I won't rest easy if he gets away with this," I asserted. "Mr. Martin, I must inform you that while our conversations as your attorney are confidential, if I have reason to believe you're planning a violent act, I may have to report it, or not," Joan cautioned. "You won't ever have to worry about that," I assured her. "Thank you for saying that." I signed an agreement with her and paid the fee, urging her to expedite the document preparation. Upon returning home around noon, my father Leland called. "Hey, how are you holding up?" he asked. "Fine," I replied. "I just left the lawyer's office." "Oh, what did they say?" he inquired. "We discussed the potential outcomes of a divorce." "Marty, you need to take your time with this. Don't rush into anything. This decision is crucial, and you shouldn't make it hastily," he advised. "Dad, the moment Lee slept with that idiot, it was over. The fact that she did it repeatedly makes it even worse, but once was enough. Mom thinks she hurt me so badly that there's no hope," I shared. "I suppose she might have a point, but still, I'd like you to take it slow. At least once, Lee should have a chance to explain everything," my father suggested. "What could she possibly say to change my mind?" I countered. There was silence for a while. Then he responded, "Okay, I can't think of anything, which is what needs to be proven." We discussed the girl's moods and emotions. Linda was deeply saddened and withdrawn, while Betsy was enraged and struggled to control herself. Mom worked with both of them, reassuring them that they wouldn't lose their parents and would always have us both, he shared. With that, we bid farewell. The home phone rang without caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. It was Lee. "Marty, if you're there, please pick up. I need to talk to you." "Marty, I need this, please. I messed up and I know it." You're the only person I trust to discuss serious matters with. Will I lose you?" she pleaded. "No," I replied softly. "Please, I understand how angry and confused you must be. I'm truly sorry," she continued amidst tears, then hung up. As she spoke, tears streamed down my face. Once again, I descended to the basement. This time, wearing gloves, I relentlessly punched and kicked the bag until exhaustion consumed me. Afterward, I showered. Some men might turn to hard drink in such situations, but I chose to channel my emotions through physical activity, like running or hitting the bag. I contemplated how to confront Larry. One persistent thought was the weapon I had found, a Taurus self-loading pistol 380 while jogging. Its serial number had been erased, making it illegal, yet I kept it. I cleaned it and tested it at a shooting range. I entertained the idea of using it against Larry, but the thought of jeopardizing my freedom, especially for him, dissuaded me. I pushed aside such thoughts, realizing it wasn't the time for a conversation with Lee. However, the mere thought of facing her made me feel sick. Alone in the house, despair engulfed me, suffocating me like a heavy blanket. With a sudden surge of fear, I leaped from the sofa, feeling as though someone might consider me insane if they saw me. I knew I had to move, so I went for a brisk walk which led me past Larry's house. I didn't linger but noted the lack of security, further fueling my unease. The house, large and new, sat close to the street, boasting a basketball hoop in the driveway. Despite the absence of a car, a spacious garage loomed behind. I strolled past it, completing a loop, and snapped a few photos with my phone. Continuing northward, I passed Lee's parents' house, where their cars were parked at the entrance. Lee's car remained in our garage. Hurrying along, I entered a store and purchased a prepaid cell phone and a Diet Pepsi, then made my way back home. It was 3 on Saturday afternoon. Upon returning home, I made myself a sandwich, though I likely consumed 3 slices. Once I stopped moving, the sense of anguish returned. Retrieving I drove out of town to a friend's property with an open shooting range. Vacant as they were in Florida, I fired 2 boxes of cartridges with the pistol. Though affordable, the weapon was functional, albeit slightly heavier than ideal. On my way back, I stopped at the pharmacy and bought 2 neoprene thigh wraps. Back home, I fashioned a body bandage to secure the .380 caliber pistol around my lumbar region, testing its comfort during a run, which proved satisfactory. My cell phone remained off all day, ignoring emails. When I powered it on, 11 voicemails awaited me, along with around 20 text messages and numerous emails from family, colleagues, and friends, all urging me to reach out. Among them were messages from Lee, Ellen, and my mother, all echoing similar sentiments of needing to talk. However, Milt's messages stood out. In the first, he apologized for Lee's actions and for his failure to raise a responsible daughter. In the second, he proposed a conversation away from women. I dialed him, but it went to voicemail. I refrained from leaving a message, yet he promptly returned the call. "Marty, I needed to clear my head with a walk. What's going on? I saw you wanted to talk." "Milt, can we meet somewhere?" "How about Rayman Park near the hops court?" "All right, in about 30 minutes? Sounds good." I donned my jeans and slipped the .380 into my pocket in case I encountered Larry, who lived half a mile from the park. After a minute drive, I arrived early, finding Milt already there. We exchanged handshakes and settled on a bench beside the court. "I wanted to make sure you're all right," Milt began. "Ellen and your mom's words had me worried." "I'm not all right, Milt. I feel worse than ever," I confessed. "Well, I recall how I felt when my mother passed. It took me a year to recover. I just kept working day after day. That's what you should do too," he advised. "Easy to say, but damn hard to do, and it's only been a day," I countered. If it's any consolation, Lee is nearly catatonic. She hasn't eaten since arriving at our house, and she's barely said a word. We're considering getting her help, or maybe you. Oddly enough, you seem to be holding up better than her. "Maybe it's the guilt. She has it, but you don't," Milt observed. "I'm sorry to hear that, Milt, because the twins will need their mother," I expressed. "I don't understand why she's so amazed, because she did everything openly. Did she really think that no one would know, that I wouldn't know? I cannot believe it. Sooner or later, even without YouTube, one of her employees, some of them my friends, would have caught wind of it. I don't think she was thinking straight at all. I think she may have suddenly found herself in a strange situation, away from her family and being stalked by a celebrity. So she succumbed to feelings that in a normal situation would have been suppressed. Here's what I can take away from it. You're so smart, Milt, but I think she had a thing for Larry since college and thought she could have her cake." "And what are you going to do?" Milt inquired. "It's very, very likely that I will divorce her now. I can't even think about her without anger and hostility." "I hope I don't get sick because of all this," I responded. "Look, I know everyone else is telling you to wait to decide something. Am I? I just can't understand how you can go back to any semblance of a family life with her," I admitted. "Yes, the case is lost. I'm going to wait, but not for long. You need to prepare her. If she's as bad as you say, I'll try, Milt concluded. And we parted ways. As I walked back to my car, parked on a nearby street, I noticed Larry dribbling a basketball up the intersecting street toward the court. I saw him and instinctively reached for my weapon. Milt, driving towards him, noticed him too and honked the horn. Larry, startled, lost control of the ball. It rolled down the street, and he recklessly chased after it without looking, resulting in a fatal accident. It wasn't Milt who hit him. A car traveling in the opposite direction struck Larry, launching him over the hood and windshield before he fell onto the street. Milt drove past the scene. I rushed to Larry's side. He was alive but barely conscious. As I looked at him, I felt a mix of emotions, including betrayal. Paramedics arrived shortly after, but despite their efforts, they couldn't save him. The police arrived, and although I was nervous about my illegal weapon, I cooperated and was released without issue. About an hour later, I disposed of the weapon and drove to Milt's house to discuss the tragic accident. Arriving at the house, I rang the bell and Ellen answered. Seeing my emotional state, she asked if I wanted to see Lee. No, too early. Milt, I replied, indicating that I needed to speak with Milt first. Milt went downstairs. I waved to him and we departed. Milt, Big Al is dead, I informed him. Damn, did you eliminate him? I saw you had a weapon, Milt responded with concern. God, Marty. But he didn't look the way he should have if he was truly upset, Milt continued. I didn't eliminate him. He got hit by a car after you honked at him. He missed his basketball and ran outside after it like a child. I saw him die, I clarified, unable to contain a smile. It's a clear accident. God works in mysterious ways. I'll leave it to you or Ellen to tell Lee that her boyfriend died. He's not her boyfriend, but we'll let her know. I guess it'll be all over the news, Milt replied. Certainly. How is she? I inquired. Also not good. On the contrary, you look upbeat, Milt observed. I even felt deceived when he died, but then I saw this as a saving grace. Marty, I want to save my daughter. I think she's heading into the abyss. I know she screwed up, but I love her, and I want her to have a life. Therefore, I ask you, if you see a way, at least do not interfere. Maybe later you can lend a helping hand, Milt requested earnestly. It's a difficult request, but I ask. Milt, I have to think about this. If we talk to her too soon, I won't be able to help. You have to keep her away from me. Let me think it over. I'll try to find a way out, I promised. Congratulations on escaping homicide, Milt remarked with a chuckle as we laughed and returned to the house. I left by car. That night I slept. The girls called me and we had a good talk. Then I just went to bed. On Sunday, I became depressed again. It was a nice day, and I had nothing better to do than think about the state of my marriage. No matter what Milt said, I knew Lee and I could never be together again. This made me sad, but it is true. I did another long run, walked down to the shopping center along the river, and returned home. I showered and went to see my parents and kids for a Sunday picnic. The twins were in a better mood. They had a conference call with Lee, who must have perked up because she was encouraging them. I wondered about this. Mom said there was no mention of Big Al, Lee's infidelity, or Larry's passing, only talk about school. Lee told the girls she would see them as soon as she got better. I had a good time with my parents and girls. While they were in the pool, I told my parents that I saw Big Al get hit and die. They were shocked. My father said, "You didn't have anything to do with it, you know?" No, it's a coincidence. I was in that park with Milt, talking. He just drove off and Larry got hit. He rushed outside to get his ball. Fine. Well, I can't say I'm sorry. May the Lord have mercy on his soul, he concluded. We changed the subject. Joan Ellis called me on Monday. First, she wanted to know how I felt about Larry's passing. She didn't know I was there. My name was not published. I told her the whole story, and she was amazed, maybe a little suspicious. I know that if I were her, I would be suspicious too. She then said that the documents would be ready on Wednesday and asked me to let her know when I wanted them to be served. I told her to wait a little because Lee was in bad shape. I made a promise of sorts to Milt. The kids decided to go to school, even though Big Al's passing and his outburst the week before were big news. I was left alone and decided to working half a day for the Army. For 2 or 3 hours I went about my business, then I picked up the girls from school after their extra classes. We ate pizza. It was something I could make myself, and they loved my pizza. We had a pleasant evening, but before going to bed, both of them inquired about their mother's return. I responded truthfully, I doubt we'll have the same agreements as before. The future is uncertain, but I don't see us reverting to how things used to be. There's something else awaiting us, but we'll always love both of you. Milt called on Tuesday, followed by Ellen. They wanted to meet, so I agreed to meet them at Starbucks. While grabbing our drinks, Milt mentioned he'd contacted a marriage counselor and suggested I engage with Lee. Ellen added that if we proceed with divorce on the grounds of infidelity, the court would likely mandate counseling anyway. Okay, I replied, but I won't deceive. Even if we dive into this and explore deeper, I still doubt it'll benefit her. Ellen reassured, we're not asking you to deceive. Just take it slow. Listen to the psychologist. Communicate with Lee, otherwise she may face significant challenges. We didn't disclose that you were present during Big Al's accident, Milt added. The first session was scheduled for the following Monday at 10 a.m. I arrived punctually, preferring not to wait in the same room as Lee. The consultant was Sylvia Price, a psychologist and certified marriage and family counselor, a woman in her 50s, slightly plump but amiable. She ushered us into her office. Until then, Lee and I hadn't exchanged a word. She appeared unwell, pale, and she kept rubbing her hands. Dr. Price briefed us on her practice, including handling cases of infidelity. She asked about my counseling goal. I aim to move forward in life and remain a good father to my children. However, I don't believe reconciliation in marriage is feasible, I stated. Lee, what are your goals? Dr. Price inquired. I wish to reclaim my former life. It may not be possible, but I desire to remain Marty's wife, even if things aren't the same, Lee responded. Dr. Price surveyed each of us. As I understand it, Lee attended a work conference in Miami, where she reconnected with a man from her university days and they spent several nights together, Dr. Price remarked. Lee affirmed this. I couldn't fathom that our Miami affair would become public knowledge. I assumed it would only be during my absence from the family, Dr. Price probed further. If that's the case, why did you go dancing with Mr. Johnson? You must have known he was a public figure. Lee explained, I thought it would be enjoyable. It wasn't near the hotel. Actually, it was fun, but I knew Hughes, my colleague, would find out about us. And of course, I realized Marty would soon learn too. Perhaps not as quickly as he actually did. Let's set that aside for now, Dr. Price redirected. Marty, could you explain why you're convinced the marriage is over? I gazed directly at Lee, the person I loved and trusted the most in this world. When I witnessed her readiness to betray me so readily and openly, I was devastated. My grandparents died in an accident, and I endured immense pain for a long time, but nothing compares to this. Never have I experienced such devastation. If Lee could do this to me, then anyone could. I could never grant her or anyone else that level of control again. Lee openly wept as I voiced this. I wanted to express that I would never trust her again. How you feel seeing her like this? Dr. Price asked. I'm just sorrowful and also extremely furious. It was so outrageously cruel to me, and to our children as well. Even if it was done out of foolishness, without the intention to inflict pain, it was so wrong. And for what? 3 nights with some guy you fancied in college? I gazed directly at her when I asked this. Lee sobbed. No, I don't know why I did it. Dr. Price intervened. Lee, calm down. Is it true that you had romantic feelings for Mr. Johnson back in college? Yes, he was this big, handsome, famous guy. He pursued me persistently, but I was with Marty and I declined, Lee admitted. So I ask, then why did you agree? Leading up to Miami, I felt a bit disconnected for a few months. We've all been so occupied. I was looking forward to a few days in Miami, thinking it might re-energize me, but as soon as I arrived, I saw Larry. He hugged me tightly, and I realized that I wouldn't resist if he made a move. Everything happened so fast, I can't make sense of it, Lee explained. I remarked, we had amazing lovemaking the night before you left, didn't we? Or were you just pretending? No, it was genuine. It kept me tingling throughout the flight. Damn, I feel awful. Lee began crying again. My tears flowed too, but my seething anger returned. I didn't believe I could contain it, so I stood up and walked to the outer office. I was about to lash out at the furniture when Dr. Price came out. Why don't you take a moment in the men's room? I'll talk to Lee alone first, then I'll speak with you in private, she suggested. That's exactly what I did. The two of them spent about 15 minutes together. Lee emerged, no longer crying. Sorry, Marty, she said. With that, she left, and Dr. Price asked me, Marty, how do you feel about Mr. Johnson's passing? You know, I was there and saw him die. And I felt relieved that he died. I could have done it myself, but he was eliminated first. It's ugly, but it's the truth. And now, the same thing, maybe even worse, this guy ruined my whole life over some nonsense. I felt cheated that I couldn't end him. Why does Lee's affair with Larry spell the ruin of your entire life? Dr. Price probed. I was a devoted family man, nothing more. What I said about betrayal, I'll never get over it. I can't fathom trusting anyone again. Lee shattered that trust. But it's only been a few days. Let me ask, have you considered how intense the closeness was between Lee and Larry? Dr. Price asked. Yes, I saw on YouTube that they were completely consumed by desire for each other. And how did it make you feel? Betrayed. It was the ultimate betrayal. Lee, no matter what happens, she'll always have the memory of her steamy affair. If we had stayed married, I'd always suspect she was thinking of him during our carnal moments. You know, I want to erase that memory for her, and I fully intend to. It's the least I can do, I said firmly. A tough situation. This is someone you deeply love, Dr. Price commented. I truly loved her deeply, in the past. That's why it hurts so much. She gutted me, I admitted. That concluded the session. Dr. Price asked me to think about what living arrangements could be made if we separated. I was tasked with presenting the details about my trip to Miami and why I felt vulnerable. I also outlined potential paths to reconciliation between Marty and me. Before heading to Miami, I felt out of sorts, no longer finding enjoyment in the things I once loved. Work had become monotonous, and family life followed suit. This had been the case for several months now, leaving me with a vague sense of stagnation. I eagerly anticipated my trip to Miami. One coworker, Brady Bean, had been persistently pursuing me since he transferred to our office. Despite my efforts to brush him off for months, treating him as a joke, he remained undeterred. While he wasn't Adonis, he was good-looking and cheerful. His continued advances didn't offend me, rather I was flattered. Although I made it clear I wasn't interested, I knew I had an effect on him, which bolstered my ego. I entertained the idea but never intended to act on it, considering it too risky, even if he were exceptionally attractive, which he wasn't. However, at our hotel check-in, Larry appeared. He was undeniably attractive. His enthusiastic hug caught me off guard, and I realized he could seduce me if he tried. He seemed to understand this too because he wasted no time taking me aside. He asked if Marty was with me. When I said no, he informed me he had a hotel room until Friday and expressed his desire for me, convinced I felt the same. I agreed to dinner with him. I can't fully explain why I succumbed so easily, feeling like a fool. Marty and I had passionate lovemaking the night before, leaving me on edge, a feeling Larry seemed to share. I didn't consider the consequences if Marty found out I cheated, or if I did, it was fleeting. I convinced myself I was in a different world for those few days. At dinner, Larry and I both knew where the evening would lead. We skipped dessert and went straight to his room. He pulled me close and we quickly shed our clothes, consumed by desire. There was no time for foreplay. He took me to his bed, and we were carnal for a long time. After experiencing multiple climaxes, I lost consciousness briefly, only to be awakened by his kiss, signaling the start of round 2. This pattern continued into the next morning. I missed breakfast with the team and barely made it to the meeting. I felt physically satisfied, and I suspected my colleagues noticed, though there were no direct comments. I entertained the thought that someone might inform Marty but dismissed it. They're clueless, it's all speculation. The closeness with Larry was unparalleled, possibly due to the distance from home and the freedom from family obligations, coupled with his muscular physique. Plus, he seemed as eager for me as I was for him. He could have had any woman, yet he chose me. My desire for him was overwhelming. After a work meeting, I reached out to him. We went straight to his room. Spent 2 hours making love, then ordered room service, followed by more closeness. The following morning brought the same curious glances. A bit uneasy, I met Larry in his room at 5 p.m., and we remained in bed until 8. The passion was still intense, but not quite as electric as the first 2 nights. Room service delivered our meals, then he suggested we go dancing, which we did. That's how we ended up on YouTube. I watched our video, knowing full well Marty had seen it. That night, I realized what Marty saw, a faithful wife openly lusting after another man. After dancing, we returned to the hotel for more closeness. The next morning, with a flight looming, Larry and I made love again, showered, and dressed. We had breakfast in his room before I returned to mine to pack. My roommate Cindy mentioned seeing me dance on YouTube, calling it spicy. Horror engulfed me. I knew I was done for. Then I ran into Bart Kovat, Marty's close friend, on the airport bus. I asked if Marty had called during my Miami trip. We hadn't been in touch. Bart informed me Marty had seen the YouTube video, knowing I spent every night with Larry. Speechless, the flight home was excruciating. No one wanted to speak to me. Sitting by the window, a stranger occupied the adjacent seat. I knew Larry was on the flight, but didn't spot him disembarking. I scanned for Larry in vain. He approached me at baggage claim, asking if I'd be okay. I replied it would likely never be the same. He seemed downcast, unprepared for Marty to pick me up. I queued for a taxi. When I boarded, the dispatcher seated Larry with me. We were dropped off near each other in the cab. Larry apologized for the YouTube incident, admitting he hadn't thought it through. I declined conversation, asking the driver to drop Larry off first. Back home, unable to face Marty's devastated and enraged expression, I fled. Since then, I've stayed with my parents. I'm in a near-constant daze. Attempting to talk to the girls was futile. Betsy rebuffed me, understandably. Phone calls were a bit better, though it took an hour to muster the courage. Now I attend counseling sessions. After that initial counseling session, I felt like my marriage had reached its end, heavily influenced by Marty's candid expression of his emotions. Now I'm grappling with how to navigate his anger and sorrow. I'm at a loss as to how I could possibly earn back his trust. I know I don't deserve him. And then there's Larry. He's gone, eliminated in a car accident. When my mother broke the news, I felt immense sorrow. During our taxi ride, Larry urged me to call him. Truthfully, I could have, but he's no longer here. That absence adds to my sense of emptiness. If I ever were to be carnal with another man, I'm certain memories of my time with Larry would linger. However, now I'm not so sure. I can't shake the feeling that if I had turned him down, he might still be alive. It doesn't make logical sense, yet it feels that way. I feel utterly lost. There's a gradual improvement on the home front, although the struggles persist. The twins are coping with school, but it's been a challenge. Betsy's anger lingers, and Linda deeply feels her mother's absence despite our nightly teleconferencing. It's hard to gauge Lee's progress from our brief calls. During our second counseling session, each of us had an individual session before coming together. Dr. Price prompted us to consider what might facilitate reconciliation. While I couldn't envision a path to rebuilding trust, I pondered if understanding Lee's motives for her affair could pave the way. However, I remained skeptical of her remorse. Reflecting on her actions, it seems Lee sought a fleeting thrill without considering the consequences. But I can't shake the feeling that perhaps she wanted to be caught, signaling deeper issues. Despite her pleas for forgiveness, I find it difficult to believe her sincerity. Even if Lee genuinely apologized and explained her actions, I'm uncertain if I could continue our relationship. It feels like I'm standing beside a ticking time bomb. Consequently, I've made the decision to proceed with filing for divorce. Today, amidst the weight of divorce papers landing on my doorstep, I found myself reflecting on the evolution of my marriage. Marty's demeanor in our recent counseling session revealed a subtle shift, a resigned acceptance, perhaps, of the inevitable end. This acknowledgement marked a pivotal moment in our journey, signaling the beginning of the end. As I returned to the workplace, the atmosphere was chilling, with colleagues casting judgmental glances. And even Brady Bean distancing himself, a stark reminder of the fallout from my actions. Consulting with my lawyer, I navigated the murky waters of custody arrangements, grappling with the reality that Marty's primary role as the homeowner would likely grant him greater custody rights. Despite the emotional turmoil, I opted for transparency, confessing my infidelity to expedite the legal proceedings. Remarkably, neither Marty nor I harbored animosity over financial matters, a testament perhaps to the deeper wounds our marriage suffered. Reflecting on my affair, I couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment from Larry's role in it. While I acknowledge my own culpability, I also recognize his part in the betrayal. Dr. Price's probing into my behavior hinted at an underlying desire for excitement, but the reality is far from liberating. Instead, I find myself grappling with a profound sense of loss and emptiness, manifested in my waning appetite for both food and closeness. Despite the allure of a potentially freer existence, I'm left feeling adrift, disconnected from the social scene and disinterested in the advances of others. As I navigate this tumultuous period, I'm left pondering the duration of this melancholy, wondering when, or if, I'll find solace amidst the wreckage of my shattered marriage. Today, the divorce proceedings reached their conclusion, granting Marty primary custody of the twins, while I will have visitation rights every other weekend, 2 weeks during the summer, and during Thanksgiving or Christmas. Despite the separation, we've maintained a semblance of routine for the girls, ensuring they receive 2 gifts for each holiday, with the Christmas haul potentially expanding. Our living arrangements mirror the past 6 months, with me residing a mere 2 miles away in my own apartment. Marty has extended an open invitation to Milt and Ellen, who frequently visit, ensuring they maintain a connection with the girls during my weekends. As for Marty's personal life, he has cautiously dipped his toes into the dating pool, casually socializing with divorced acquaintances, including 3 women from our former circle of friends. These encounters are light-hearted, typically consisting of dinners or bowling outings, underscored by a clear understanding of his reluctance to commit to anything serious. While some may hold out hope for his eventual healing, Marty remained skeptical, acknowledging the enduring pain inflicted by my betrayal. The mere thought of me with that other man still haunts him, a wound that refuses to fully heal, despite his best efforts to suppress it. The twins, meanwhile, are adjusting to the new normal. Linda displays kindness toward me while Betsy harbors lingering resentment, mirroring Marty's own guarded nature. This dynamic remains unspoken between Marty and me, as communication between us has dwindled to a minimum, driven by his desire to minimize painful encounters. Despite Ellen's concerns for my well-being, Marty finds it difficult to summon any sympathy, still grappling with the unanswered questions surrounding my actions. It's a chapter of his life he's eager to close, yet its impact lingers, a constant reminder of betrayal and shattered trust. It's tempting to attribute everything to a series of unlikely coincidences: my vague discontent, the opportunity to go to Miami, and crucially, my meeting with Larry, all converge to unravel the marriage. It's a dead end, a point of no return. Update: 1 year later, Milt Moore found himself on the golf course, his regular foursome disrupted by the presence of an old-school friend, Fred Cunningham. As they strolled from the ninth tee, they broached a personal conversation, one they hadn't dared to discuss over the phone. "How are you holding up these days, Fred?" Milt inquired. "I'm managing," Fred replied, his tone tinged with resignation. I decided to confront it head-on. I followed him from his house, just as you suggested. It was also routine, his Saturday afternoon golfing ritual, even after retirement. It was a shock to read about it in the papers. I never imagined he'd dart into the street like that, but I knew I had to act. Milt nodded in understanding. "Your honk likely startled him. It shook me to the core as well. It felt like divine intervention, protecting Marty in the nick of time. But seeing him die, witnessing it firsthand, it left me questioning everything." "I knew Marty carried a weapon," Fred admitted somberly. "I feared he'd take matters into his own hands eventually. He had a right to feel cheated, but did Larry deserve to die? It's hard to say. What's clear is that Marty and the girls deserve to live, as did Lee. It's a heavy burden to bear," Milt said, his voice low. Their conversation trailed off, unspoken words hanging in the air. They walked in silence, side by side, each grappling with their own thoughts, a silent acknowledgement of the weight of their shared secret. "My family believed I wasn't my dad's son and cut me off completely. Now they want to reconnect. 4 years ago, Dad found out my mom had a lifelong affair, more than one, but that's another story. He knew about a couple of affairs she had in the past and forgave her, hanging in there for the kids, moving on, blah blah. But that time, 4 years ago, he found out me and my 2 siblings might not be his kids, considering the time of the affair. This was the first time we all heard of Mom's, well, everything really. There was a whole DNA thing, and it turned out my siblings were my dad's, and I was not. Cool, right? So Dad leaves Mom, divorces her, moves out, and takes both my siblings with him. Not me, though. I stay behind with Mom, who hits a new low, finding herself alone, and we both become pretty much outcasts as far as most of the family is concerned. My older brother was particularly mean to me. We were really tight before, and the stuff he did to me, I swear, had I been bigger at the time, I would have punched him hard more than once. I don't want to get into details because I can't, since I could be recognized. But stuff happened, and I got DNA tested again. As it turns out, DNA number 1 was messed up, and I am my dad's kid. Now, I don't need legal advice on this. Grandpa is the man, always had my back. We got a lawyer and are looking to settle, but Dad wants back in my life. Brother is calling and wanting to meet up and talk. I don't want to. I want these people out of my life. Mom already forgave everyone. She's going on a date with my dad, and I feel sick, but not my business, right? I wish them both good luck, but I want none of it. Only nobody leaves me be. I keep hearing that they're family, and I ought to hear them out and give them a chance, or I'll regret it later. And that the only reason I won't talk to them is because I'm a teen and stupid or some other shitty explanation. So, give me some perspective here, please. Do I sound unreasonable when I say thanks, but no thanks? Till Dr. Dad thought I wasn't his kid left. Turns out I am his kid, so he wants to be pals again, and I want him gone. Update 1, thank you all for the advice, but I decided to go with my grandpa, which was kind of the same most of you gave me, and I'll be standing my ground. I've been really annoyed lately because a lot of people around me keep saying I'm a crazy teen and I'll regret it. But Grandpa made a point that I need to stop trying to decide how I'll feel in the future because the truth is you can never know. You have to make decisions now based on feelings and info you have now, not based on feelings and info you might have later. Right now, I'm disgusted by Dad and brother. I want nothing to do with them. I don't trust them, and I even think there is a chance they might be doing this, reaching out just for optics and money. If my feelings change, I will deal with that when they do. Cross the bridge when I get to it. And all. Yeah, I wasn't really going to post an update on this because I don't see the point. My story is kind of over, but something happened yesterday, and I wanted to share. So I decided to stand by my no, I don't want to talk to them. I'll be moving to another city soon and decided to change my number. Grandpa is the only one who will be having the new one. I asked him not to share, and I know he won't. He is a retired cop, so he's really badass and has zero patience for nonsense. My new number is safe. He called my mom and told her that from now on, if anyone wanted to reach me, they'd have to go through him. So Mom showed up at his place. I've been living with him for a while and tries to talk to me, but Grandpa says she has to talk to him first so he can decide whether she is allowed to talk to me or not. So Mom goes insane and starts telling him that it's none of his business and that this is between me and my dad. So Grandpa goes, "If anybody shows up on my lawn to disturb the boy, I'll get the cops, a restraining order, and a shotgun." It goes on for a while until Mom says, "I'm not the only family Grandpa has, and that by doing this, Grandpa is pushing everyone away and splitting the family. He has other grandchildren. Why is he picking just the one?" And so on. So Grandpa laughs and tells her that through no fault of his, this family blew up long ago, and everyone just grabbed a piece of what was left and ran for it. He looks at me and says, I'm his piece, so he's not letting go. I was feeling like laughing up to this point because Mom was going crazy and all, but when he said that, I broke. Mom left after a while, and I just hugged my old man like life depended on it, and he just said something like, "Enough now, no need for that. I'm your family. Family doesn't leave you. Remember that when you have one of your own." And I will. Edit. Before I forget, some people were asking about what my siblings were like. Well, my older brother stole stuff that was mine or supposed to be mine. He lied to me and about me, not the innocent kid lie, but the kind that ruined relationships I had with friends, family, even a girlfriend I cared about. He was a huge bully for years, even hit me once. Mom said he's going through a lot too, and Dad couldn't care less and just protected him. Grandpa told him if he ever hit me again, he would break brother's teeth in. I guess he believed him because he never touched me after that one time. Younger brother is cool. I'd rather not talk about him here. Another edit, I read the comments section to Grandpa. I had to explain what OG is, and he now wants to watch Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Laugh out loud, but we thank you for all the love. Reading the replies on my first post, he just said, "The internet is very smart." Reading the replies on this update, he got a little emotional and left, saying he had stuff to do, but he got a beer, came back, and asked if there were more people saying stuff. The comment comparing him to Clint Eastwood made his day. Thanks for the love, guys. Update 2. It is an act of God that I still remember the password to this throwaway, but guys, people, you are not going to believe this. I don't freaking believe this. The lab did make a mistake on my results. What they did is they mixed the results of all children. I am my dad's biological son, but my older brother is not, which is weird because he looks like Dad. Maybe Mom has a type. Turns out it was his lab results stuff or whatever with my name on it. He will be triple checking it now with another lab, but, I mean, the settlement has a confidential disclosure clause, something on details, so I will not be speaking about this ever again. See you. It's damn good money, so shush. But I had to share this because laugh out loud if anybody is keeping score. I now believe in karma. Story 2. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen happen at Walmart? I saw a dwarf security guard take a flying leap into and beat the living crap out of a 60-year-old black man in a Hawaiian shirt who was trying to steal about $600 worth of steak. The steak guy did this once a month or so. He would just fill up a shopping cart with steaks, briskets, pork ribs, etc., head up to the front, act like he was going to check out, then barrel through the exit doors and dump it into a waiting truck. They never got a clear plate and were trying to catch him in the act. I was working my counter and heard behind me, "Sir, don't do it. Just step away from the cart." Walmart security is plain clothes and has no legal authority. They can detain you and defend themselves, but they can't restrain you. You can leave whenever you want. I turn around, and I see this guy with the shopping cart full of steaks. He's starting to stammer and come up with excuses while simultaneously trying to play it off. "Sir, just come with us, please. Let go of the cart, sir." The guard trying to get him calm was the head of security there. He was a chill guy in his 30 seconds, but built like a brick. You might think he was chubby. If you looked at him, you wouldn't dream he could bench like 340 plus lbs. The steak guy makes his break, tries to blow past Chubb's McMuscles, and they end up going into a stack of DVDs. Then came Eric. Eric was I'm honestly not sure he would qualify as a dwarf, perhaps just a guy with a growth disability. He was about 4 feet tall, max. He would look like a 12-year-old, except for the fact that he was completely yoked. He was one of those just itching for action type guys. He seemed like he had something to prove. So Muscle Chubs and Steak Guy are now down in the DVDs, and Steak Guy goes to get up, and here comes Eric. I'm probably wrong, but I swear in my mind I heard the Ninja Turtles theme, and the little dude leapt through the air, both feet out, and just cannonballed this guy in the chest, feet first. He went down again. I heard Chubbs yell, "Eric, no!" as he scrambled onto the guy's chest and just started throwing little hands into this dude's face, just wham, 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 wham. This is not what they teach you to do in Walmart security. Loss prevention, I think, is the official department. Eric was fired pretty much immediately. Walmart got sued, and they'd have been better off just letting the guy run out with the steaks, but boy, what a show. Edit, a little epilogue. I just found out Eric's actual name was Josh. I couldn't remember it, made one up. And he's a sex offender who was recently arrested for going to an elementary school as an elf with sex offender status. Life is weird.
I work the night shift, and my wife works the day shift. Her workplace mostly has male colleagues, so she spends more time with them. But there are also women in auxiliary roles, like in the office or the spare parts department. We've been together since we were 17, and now we're in our 40s with children. I won't go into the details of our family life. It's worth noting that she recently started working in this field, so workplace relationships have become a new thing. She's been spending more time with her female colleagues after work, not just occasionally. She finishes work around 5 but comes home at 7 or 8. A couple of times, she even stayed overnight at their place after drinking, which surprises me because she's usually responsible and doesn't drink in public places. But for now, I'm not too worried. I was at home last night, not working, and went to bed at my usual time. At 3 a.m., her phone screen's glow woke me up. I couldn't tell if she was texting or browsing the internet, and she didn't seem to hide it from me, so probably nothing suspicious. However, she got up and started getting ready for work, even though her shift doesn't start until 8 o'clock. I asked her about it, and she agreed, but said she was going for a walk with her colleagues. She's a diesel engine repair mechanic, and looked more dressed up than I'd expect for a walk or a regular work day. She left around 4 o'clock, probably reaching her friend's place by 4:30. It was still dark, drizzling, and about 45 degrees outside, which doesn't seem like good conditions for a walk, especially in Arizona where raincoats aren't common. Also, she drives a truck and I drive a car. At 5 o'clock, I texted her about using the truck for a dump run, but she didn't respond. So I called her 15 minutes later, and she said they were still on the walk. She asked me to pick up the truck at her workplace. If it weren't raining, I might have considered checking if her hair was wet after a second shower. I tend to overanalyze things due to my unique way of thinking, and sometimes I have trouble reading social cues. So, I'm wondering if I'm overthinking this. I decided to confront her and ask to see her phone. She tried to divert my attention and demanded to see my phone, which I gave her along with the password. I had nothing to hide since I hardly have any personal time, let alone meet others. However, when I checked her active messages, nothing was deleted. But when I tried to find a specific conversation that had caught my attention earlier, it had oddly disappeared. Feeling suspicious, I called the person who had raised my fears, hoping to see his name. I handed her the phone and told her I wanted to see their text conversation. She acted innocent, but I pointed out that she messaged him before leaving home and after returning, even when she claimed to be in Vegas. Instead of explaining, she acted confused, as if she didn't understand why the telephone operator had stored their messages. Disappointed, she went upstairs and refused to talk further. Feeling hurt and betrayed, I decided to pack up and leave. I informed her of my intentions and left after packing my things. Now, let me share what I learned from the police investigator about the confrontation. Firstly, he emphasized that for minor offenses, the guilty party rarely fully admits. Even if they confess in one instance, they often withhold important details. So it's unrealistic to expect a complete admission, especially in cases of ongoing infidelity. When you find yourself in such a situation, it's a major breach of trust, and you might need to consider legal action or making a significant decision. You're essentially looking for more information to use later. He also advises starting a confrontation by suggesting you have more information than they think and encouraging them to talk. The truth is the only valuable thing in this situation, so don't reveal the extent of your knowledge. Treat it like a high-stakes poker game and don't show your hand. He also noted that despite searching her phone, don't expect to find anything. It's likely well hidden or already deleted unless they lack intelligence. Perpetrators tend to conceal evidence, anticipating a confrontation. Your job is to establish the absence of text messages and call logs. To provide evidence, it's crucial to obtain records of text messages and calls from your telecom operator and check for gaps in dates and times. Lack of communication with a specific person suggests they were together. In these moments, make them believe you have the information while concealing its limitations. Obtaining direct evidence of their wrongdoing is often challenging. During a confrontation, demand access to their phone. They will likely resist and demand to see your phone, making similar accusations. Be prepared for them to stare at you. Your wife reacted the same way when I asked. She claimed not to know my password and insisted I reveal it. Remember that the guilty parties fear being discovered and are more concerned about what you might find on their phone than what they might find on yours. Pay attention to their willingness to disclose information relevant to you. In my case, my wife showed very little interest. She barely looked at the messages and didn't even check the photo gallery where questionable content is usually found. Instead, she was more focused on the phone in my hand as I casually scrolled through a list of harmless text conversations. She even said, "See, I don't know what you think I'm up to." To continue my investigation, I opened the phone app, entered the suspect's number, and tapped on the SMS icon. To my surprise, there were no messages. I went back to the contact and showed it to her, asking about the missing messages. She replied that they never communicated. I disagreed and informed her that in just the past month, she had exchanged over 900 messages with him. I pressed her to reveal where those messages had gone. Initially, she pretended to be innocent, but deep down, she likely knew that the number I provided was accurate. Reluctantly, she admitted she had deleted them, but didn't disclose the whole truth. It turned out those messages were about her wanting a divorce, which she wasn't ready to tell me yet. I didn't give away too many details, like how far my suspicions had gone. Instead, I provided enough information to instill confidence and make it clear that I had full knowledge of the situation. Knowing the exact number of texts was important, as it served as solid evidence, reinforcing the message that I wasn't bluffing when I claimed to know something. This behavior is a typical sign of guilt. When someone is caught in a tough spot, they often try to dodge and use various tactics to avoid responsibility. To deflect blame, they often offer explanations about their whereabouts. However, it's crucial to closely scrutinize the information they provide. If their explanations are vague and seem forced, it's important to persistently seek more details. Many false explanations are created with little planning and can easily fall apart with further investigation. While they may provide some information about going to a bar with friends, it will likely lack specific details, such as a heated argument or who won a game of darts. Innocent spouses typically willingly share details of a pleasant evening with friends. Guilty ones, on the other hand, wonder why you're so interested in their activities. Remember, they're anticipating a confrontation and are already thinking about how an innocent person would act in this situation, crafting a plausible version. This idea applies even to drawing attention to themselves. When our oldest daughter had a conflict with my wife, she later told me, she had two reasons for this. First, she wanted to steer the conversation in the right direction in case our daughter turned to me. Secondly, culprits often think that by putting themselves at the center of attention, the focus will eventually fade. Looking back, I realized I made a mistake by not asking why our daughter came to that conclusion. I should have asked her to clarify what she said that led to that conclusion. Looking back, I should have taken the initiative and called my daughter myself. It's worth considering how an innocent spouse would respond when accused by someone else. They would likely be happy to provide unsolicited detailed explanations because they have a clear conscience. Now, let's think about how an innocent person would behave. They might be annoyed by a request to see their phone since they still expect some privacy, but in the end, they would hand over the phone without much resistance. In all likelihood, they'd be genuinely puzzled at first. Honest individuals don't try to mislead or deceive others. It's also important to note that the most convincing lies often contain elements of truth. In my wife's case, she claimed to have spent time alone in a tattoo parlor getting sketches. However, when she returned home, She didn't bring any sketches or take pictures of them. Moreover, she said very little about the experience and only showed me some design ideas from the internet. She said the appointment was at 1 p.m., but she left our house at 11:30 a.m., so it only took her 45 minutes to get to the tattoo parlor. When she got back home, it was around 6 p.m. While I believe she did visit the tattoo parlor that day, I suspect she may have visited his house beforehand. Maybe they did something together, and buying a ticket for a future visit could serve as a potential alibi. They might have had lunch and deep conversations about moral theology at his place before returning home. This is when I decided to sort out the situation. So it's important to note that a simple alibi doesn't always explain every detail. She mentioned difficult traffic, but didn't provide any specific details, like a blue Honda overturning. She also mentioned going to Home Depot to look for lifting belt rings, but returned empty-handed, indicating an unsuccessful trip. There are other details he taught me, but I can't recall them all now. I'll report them as soon as I can. She continues to maintain a relationship with him, and it seems unlikely that things will work out between us. I've come to terms with the fact that my anger issues played a significant role in her distancing herself, but I'm actively working on improving myself and have made progress. Although she never admitted to cheating, I'm ready to forgive considering my part in this situation. She said our relationship has no hope, but she offered cohabitation for the sake of our children. I have concerns about the terms of cohabitation, as it appears to be a compromise driven by her hidden fears. In response, I offered her a divorce, if that's what she really wants. However, since she hasn't mentioned it, I take it as a clear sign that she doesn't want a divorce. There's a possibility she's starting to soften her stance. As evidence, we recently went out for dinner with the kids, and she was friendly. We even had a pleasant conversation, and she maintained eye contact. At that time, I genuinely thought that the walls around her heart were starting to thaw. But things took a different turn on the way back home. She made a subtle comment, seemingly to remind herself that she no longer loves me. People often say it's easy to walk away from a cheater, but when you share children, the pain of betrayal runs deep. The life I knew was closely tied to our shared existence. Those who believe I'm showing weakness can see themselves as victorious. However, this morning, I woke up to find her gone. I know where she is, even without knowing where he is. I know his address. I took some photos of her truck in his garage earlier, although I'm not quite sure why I felt the need to do that. Maybe it was to understand her emotional state. When I arrived at their place, I initially spotted only his car in the driveway. To my surprise, her car was nearby. Unaware of my presence, she texted me, asking if we needed any household supplies like garbage bags. I replied that we were out of groceries, and using the opportunity, I asked if she could buy cream for me. While pretending to be confident about her location, I didn't react at first. Soon, I noticed him driving his car out of the driveway, and her car was parked in reverse. It was clear they left together. I walked up to the door, intending to ring the bell, but got no response. In an attempt to initiate a conversation, I messaged her, asking if she had received the mentioned letter. She said she hadn't seen it, and I shared its contents with her. After that, she expressed willingness to discuss the matter. Later, when she texted me that she was at Costco, I immediately replied that I knew she wasn't there. About 45 minutes later, I received a message with a photo of a familiar Costco building. It was evident she had just arrived and was creating a story. Choosing not to give in to persuasion, I asked her to send a photo of her truck if she wanted me to believe her. She calmly replied that she honestly didn't care about convincing me. At that moment, I had to acknowledge her good intentions. She might have been trying to shield me from more emotional pain. Perhaps she even feared my reaction, which made me feel regretful. However, the constant lies were causing more distress than the unfiltered truth. In an effort to confirm her words, she sent me a photo of herself inside a Costco store. Despite receiving this evidence, I chose not to respond, allowing the weight of her deception to linger in silence. I'm in a state of deep internal turmoil, contemplating those moments when, in fits of anger, I contemplated leaving her and our children. Though I'm determined not to repeat such behavior, I admit that I'm now at a point where I'm ready to explore a new path to extricate myself from this situation. Yesterday, I had a consultation with an attorney, and we discussed the current situation. Following my therapist's advice, I made a deliberate choice not to rush into decisions while my emotions are still running high. Instead, I opted to wait and carefully consider the available options. Currently, my soon-to-be ex-wife and I continue to live together for the sake of our children. It's not an easy arrangement, as I often feel financially burdened supporting the household while she's involved with another man. Adding to the complexity, she maintains a separate group chat with our kids, using it to share false information, like going out drinking with someone named Maria at 4 a.m. I realized she'd have to go to work soon, with just a few hours before her shift starts. Given that bars are typically closed at this time, it became evident that her recent claims of going out for drinks were mere fiction. I'm even more concerned about how these lies affect our youngest child, who, as it turns out, has autism. With a high level of functioning, he tends to look up information about the opening hours of various establishments, like bars or gyms. They're starting to catch her in a web of deceit. If she can continue deceiving me without consequences, the repercussions of her dishonesty now extend to our children. But after a few quiet nights, I've reached a point where her actions no longer keep me awake at night. I've already consulted with a lawyer who informed me that with shared custody, the alimony I'll have to pay amounts to only $42 a month. My wife doesn't want to sell our family home, and it's evident that she can't buy it from me or acquire it on her own. However, according to my lawyer, if I decide to sell the house, then it will indeed be sold. This realization puts me in a somewhat challenging position. I have considerably more savings than she does, which puts my property at risk of being divided equally. Nevertheless, there are some investments and shares in the company that haven't fully matured yet. The lawyer assures me that these assets can be protected because there's still some ambiguity surrounding them. Furthermore, the lawyer suggested I could safeguard all my assets by using the house as leverage in negotiations. If I decide to contribute only half of the house payments until our children reach adulthood in 5 years, I can negotiate an equal share of future assets. By using this as a trump card, I can preserve my savings. So the situation has effectively turned into a real estate transaction. On a personal level, I have to admit that I succumbed to the stress of sleep deprivation and overwhelming grief, which led me to attempt reconciliation with an unfaithful wife. I began begging her desperately, as a person lacking self-respect. About 2 weeks ago, I reached a breaking point and had to leave work early because I couldn't concentrate properly. At that moment, I hoped her car would still be parked outside the house, and that maybe a spark of affection for me would rekindle in her heart. Looking back, I now understand how crucial it is in such circumstances never to let myself appear as a fool. I tried to initiate a conversation with her, but my efforts were futile, and I couldn't help but feel pitiful. It seemed my pleas went unanswered. Sunday came and went, and I had no particular place to be. I informed her that I wouldn't be home until the workday started, giving her the opportunity to be with the kids while I was away. After buying pizza for the kids, she left again. Feeling lost and unsure of what to do, I sat in the car, browsing various internet forums and getting distracted by other things. For reasons I can't entirely explain, I ended up downloading Tinder and setting up a profile. My initial intention wasn't to seek a chance encounter, so I mindlessly swiped left on all the profiles that caught my eye. However, I did strike up a conversation with one girl, though it didn't really pique my interest. The next morning after work, I stumbled upon another profile and, despite my uncertainty, impulsively swiped right. To my surprise, we hit it off right away, and she greeted me with a message, "Hello, handsome." It was incredibly heartening to receive such kind words at a time when I really needed them. We started chatting, and things flowed smoothly. We even had a couple of drinks together. Surprisingly, Tuesday night turned into a date. Considering the possibility that this relationship could develop into something more, I felt the need to honestly share my current situation. Starting any potential relationship on honesty is important to me. Interestingly, she had also experienced infidelity and had been divorced for some time, but expressed a desire to start dating again. When the evening came to a close, I walked her to her car, and we shared a kiss. It's important to note that my wife has already initiated the divorce process, so legally, we're no longer bound. To be honest, the thought of this woman and the possibility of finding hope again brought me reassurance, finally allowing me to sleep peacefully. Perhaps, in His infinite mercy, God decided to send someone to show that I am deserving of appreciation. This experience rekindled my hope for the future, and even if this connection doesn't turn into something deeper, I'm grateful for the momentary happiness she brought me. I'm well aware that everything is moving swiftly, but it's essential to recognize that my marriage has been unstable for many years. The idea of divorce has crossed my mind more than once, but I've never taken immediate action. I must admit that I didn't take active steps to salvage the marriage. The affair with her was the final straw that led to our split. Looking back, we can possibly say it was necessary since neither of us was truly happy, but neither had the courage to initiate the breakup. Reflecting on this situation, I can't help but wonder if I would have given in to the temptation of infidelity had I been put to the test. The fear of being potentially unfaithful has always kept me at a distance from other women. Unfortunately, those joyful memories my wife and I once shared now seem distant and faded, much like the memories of a terminally ill person. Passing away is a profound event that brings immediate grief when it occurs. However, I believe that in such circumstances, the awareness of the inevitability of end arrives more swiftly, primarily due to the recognition of its inescapability. Today, I took a significant step. I made an advance payment, officially commencing the divorce process. As a result, our cohabitation will likely end soon. My son and I decided to become neighbors and find a new place to live together. Currently, he doesn't communicate with his mother. Due to her infidelity, I plan to sell the house and claim my rightful share of the assets. Even though she's against it, her problem is that she can't afford the mortgage payments and won't receive enough funds from the divorce settlement to buy me out. The costs associated with initiating divorce proceedings came to $2,500. Despite the initial pain, the payoff is worth it. Day trading isn't just a hobby for me, it's a skill I excel in. With increasing profits, I anticipate taking part in larger deals. Furthermore, I've long desired to own a 1979 Fiat Spider convertible, a dream I could never justify as a responsible married man. However, circumstances have changed, and I'm no longer bound by such restrictions, so when things settle down, I'll finally get behind the wheel of the car I've longed for. I hope that by the time I purchase it, a custom license plate, as I discussed with my lawyer, will be affixed, echoing the words of the song, "Damn, It's Good to Be a Gangster." I can't help but wonder if she'll explode with anger when she receives a summons and realizes I'm determined to sell the house. The irony is that we'll both leave with enough money to start fresh in our own homes. She might even move in with her loved ones, and I'll go about my business. My wife, who cheated on me, is now returning her truck to the bank and trying to strike up casual conversations with me via text messages. However, I've managed to maintain a neutral and unresponsive attitude toward her, often choosing to ignore her messages. She recently messaged me about evaporative coolers at Home Depot. It reminded me of our unsuccessful attempt to buy one during a winter sale. She also inquired about when I'd return home, mentioned that we'd be living in separate rooms, and even wished me a good time at the water park tomorrow. It was a trip I'd planned to take with the kids. By the way, fellow dads, water parks seem to be a gathering spot for single moms after a divorce. Today, my ex-wife sent me an SMS saying that she'll be renting her truck, for which she'll need to pay $730 a month. Consequently, our eldest child will no longer have access to a dependable car with a mileage of 220,000 miles. I must admit that the fact that she's facing the consequences of her actions brings some satisfaction. Furthermore, I had a lengthy conversation with my sister who shared information about the man my wife is currently involved with. I discovered that the man my wife is dating has 4 previous failed marriages. According to my sister, he has a pattern of forming attachments to women, depleting their finances, and then disappearing from their lives. Though it seems unlikely, my sister passed this information along to me. In response, I told her that if this is indeed the case, I hope he defeats my wife quickly so we can complete our divorce process. I also mentioned that I hope their relationship continues until I finish the necessary legal paperwork and extricate myself from this situation. On a related note, I recently had a conversation with my wife about this topic. She informed me of her plans to return the truck as part of her intention to refinance the house. Due to financial difficulties, she can't manage to make a cash payment to settle the truck and handle the new loan amount simultaneously. Interestingly, this aligns with my own plan, which involved moving out of our shared house. She was aware that I was searching for a new residence and had no intention of staying in a house where she was freely engaging in an extramarital affair. I informed her that I intended to transfer ownership of the house to her, but I demanded a buyout. I have various liquid assets that she has to relinquish in order to obtain my share. Despite the substantial sum, it still falls short of my required amount. The potential cost of a swift departure still seems minor. I aim to settle this matter while she remains cooperative. Experience has shown that with time and increasing physical separation, people tend to undervalue the importance of an equitable division. Even though she expressed dissatisfaction about not receiving a portion of the liquid assets, I assured her that she would have full ownership of the house and could do with it as she saw fit, whether that meant keeping it until our children grow up or inviting her boyfriend to live there. The decision is hers to make. Nevertheless, I remain cautious and watchful. Tomorrow marks an important moment for me. I'm purchasing a new home and getting the necessary legal documents drawn up by my lawyer. Those who have been known my life routine know that my ex-wife, with whom I've spent 19 years, decided to have an affair, which I discovered back in March. Initially, I attempted a futile and desperate choose-me dance to salvage the relationship, but after consulting with a psychologist, I realized that my life would ultimately improve without her presence. As a result, I found a rented house conveniently located within walking distance of our current home, allowing our children the freedom to come and go as they please. To simplify my schedule and ensure easy pickup and drop-off of the children from school, I decided to switch work shifts. The move is set to happen tomorrow, as I've already received the keys to our new home. In addition, I've arranged for the utilities to be connected. Fortunately, I'm financially stable and can afford this new venture. I should mention that I have an appointment with a lawyer to process the divorce documents. My future ex-wife and I reached an agreement via email, and the lawyer will use this agreement as a template for the legal documents. If all goes well, we'll be able to sign everything during the meeting and then patiently wait for the required waiting period. If things progress smoothly, I expect to receive a divorce decree sometime in late June or early July. It may not be as much as I'd like, but I believe my mental well-being is worth it. Regarding my job, I still have a few restricted shares, the rights to which will vest in the future. Fortunately, our agreement states that my future ex-wife waives any claim to these shares if I choose to stay in my current position. These shares can be quite valuable. Given the ongoing support I receive from the company, including 30 days of leave and short-term disability benefits, I see no reason to leave. All this experience has solidified my loyalty to the employer. Thankfully, my future ex-wife has a well-paying job that surpasses the poverty line, which means I won't be obligated to pay spousal support. Additionally, with equal custody rights and my coverage of the children's medical, dental, and vision insurance costs, my alimony obligations amount to only $42 per month for less than 60 months. We are currently discussing the possibility of waiving this commitment. Looking ahead, I can say that in 5 years, once the children have grown up, I'll have accumulated enough savings to retire abroad at the age of 47 instead of working in the USA until I'm 70. Feeling trapped in my marriage, I realized that I was squandering money on extravagant houses and unnecessary material possessions that held little true value for me. In a way, living on the other side of the world from my future ex-wife has presented an unexpected advantage. While my heart may be broken at the end of this relationship, I don't want it to define me or rob me of the ability to love. I believe there's a special person out there to whom I'll eventually entrust my heart, even if it means becoming vulnerable again. Love and hope are incredibly powerful forces that should never fade, even in the face of betrayal by a cheating spouse. In such times, I find comfort in a quote I'd like to share with you. However, we do not look back for a long time. We continue to move forward, opening new doors and embracing new experiences. Our curiosity propels us onto uncharted paths. This serves as a reminder not to dwell on the past for too long, but to focus on moving forward discovering new opportunities, and embracing the unknown. Curiosity becomes our guiding light, leading us to fresh and exciting journeys in life. Having made the decision to start anew, I'm taking steps to fulfill my wish list, and in a few hours, I'll embark on a journey abroad. Since July is dedicated to self-discovery, I've planned a trip to Thailand. As I navigate the waters of singledom again, it's crucial for me to reconnect with forgotten aspects of myself. At this stage, I'm actively seeking new experiences and adding them to my ever-expanding list. When my soon-to-be ex-wife sends me a message, I respond at my own pace, sometimes taking several days while the divorce proceedings continue. I prioritize my own well-being and ensure the process is moving forward. Financial matters and property division have been successfully resolved, leaving only custody and alimony matters. My lawyer advised against accepting my future ex-wife's unreasonable proposal, which is unlikely to be approved by any judge. Instead, we made our own proposal. In my proposal, I emphasize that our children are now at an age where they can express their preferences regarding custody arrangements. I've also secured a residence within walking distance of my future ex-wife's home to make it convenient for the children to visit. It's worth noting that after I moved, she wasted no time in relocating her lover to a new residence. If this situation initially bothered me, I now find it somewhat comical, almost like a cliché. Regarding my trip, I must admit that someone else is joining me. A new girl. Interestingly, the cause of my sleepless nights is not the pain of my spouse's infidelity, but the 14-hour time difference. For those still facing difficulties, I offer a simple piece of advice. Don't give up. Despite the challenges we encounter, it's crucial to maintain momentum and keep moving forward. After a lengthy process, I'm pleased to announce that my divorce is officially finalized. In summary, I made the tough choice to leave my ex-wife after she began an affair, signaling her desire to end our marriage. Unfortunately, the outcome regarding custody and alimony was not as favorable as I'd hoped, but I was prepared for the ideal outcome to be more of a wish than a reality. Still, I managed to negotiate with her regarding the alimony payment. To secure a better future for our teenage boys, I convinced her to allocate half of the alimony toward their college savings. Considering our children are now teens, her suggestion that they spend weekends with us seemed reasonable, as they are almost adults and can make their own choices. With only a few significant events remaining, the custody agreement now requires my ex-spouse to handle the children's school transportation. However, this situation allowed me to secure a travel position at my job, which enables me to work overtime for about 15 hours a week and cover food expenses. Fortunately, this overtime doesn't affect the alimony calculation in our jurisdiction. Additionally, I made adjustments to my work insurance policy, excluding her from the participants, resulting in additional savings for me. It's possible that the insurance she receives at work may surpass what she gets in alimony. Furthermore, I recently learned about some health issues she's facing, including breast cysts, which further complicate her situation. The fact that she's dealing with potential health problems following her affair with another man might be seen as a form of poetic justice. I apologize if my words seem harsh, but I believe in speaking honestly. In light of recent events, I've taken measures to update my life insurance plan so she can't benefit from it. The other day, I encountered her personally while providing financial assistance for our child's medical needs. Surprisingly, this encounter didn't affect me emotionally. I'm moving forward, trying to live a positive life free from negative influences. My advice to those just starting on this challenging path is not to lose hope. Remember that there's light at the end of the tunnel and brighter days lie ahead. I must admit that in the initial stages, I acted disrespectfully, begging her to return and displaying a lack of confidence and composure. It even led to me taking temporary leave from work and facing other problems. However, I can confidently say that it's possible to survive. It may not be easy, but it's achievable. It seems like karma's wheels are beginning to turn. I've always believed that justice prevails and people tend to face the consequences of their actions. I recently learned that my ex-wife was terminated from her job, which ironically was at the same place where she first met her lover. This seems fitting, given her history of damaging previous marriages and engaging in inappropriate relationships with colleagues. Considering her past actions, It's possible the circumstances were viewed differently. Yes, it's true. She had 2 affairs, and it turns out her partner was also married. Later, I found out she was diagnosed with breast cancer and is now undergoing treatment. Having lost her job, she's barely making ends meet. It also came to light that her older lover persuaded her to sell the house and disappeared with the money. While the children say she's in an emotional breakdown, I can't find sympathy for her. She chose this path for herself. While she slowly faces the consequences, I'm building a new relationship with a woman who values and loves me.
I'm Daryl Gibson. I was married to Sheila, who I thought was amazing. We had what I believed were 24 blissful years together, but it turns out only the first 21 were truly happy. Then, out of the blue, Sheila decided to end things. Apparently, she had been seeing this guy named Jeff Woods for the last 3 years. And yeah, they weren't just talking. They were falling in love and having an affair. Now, I'm a grown man, so if she didn't want to be with me anymore, then fine, she could go. But life goes on. The real pain set in when I discovered that my 3 kids, Jason, Michael, and Kimberly, knew about the whole thing all along. They knew about the affair and that their mom was planning to leave me. But they didn't tell me because they didn't want to get caught in the middle. Essentially, they chose to side with their mom and kept me in the dark. Bitter doesn't even begin to cover how I felt. But instead of wallowing in it, I decided to buy a boat and started sailing. I did a bit of charter work here and there, but mostly I just drifted around. This became my life for 7 years. Then out of nowhere, my daughter Kimberly called me. She told me that her mom needed a favor. Sheila had a new daughter named Karen, and they wanted me to get tested to see if I could donate a kidney. It wasn't hard to figure out what that meant. And just in case I didn't get it, my sons came by to explain it to me, like I was some kind of idiot. They made it clear that Sheila was pregnant with my kid when she left me. They knew, and they never said a word. I was disgusted with them for knowing and keeping that from me. So, what did I do with all this dumped on me? I decided to take a trip to Bermuda and get away from it all. I was getting ready to set sail when Sheila suddenly appeared. I'd already pulled up the anchor and was drifting away from the dock when she ran up and jumped onto the boat. The boat was about 7 feet away from the pier when I decided to cut the engines. I was just about to throw her overboard when I noticed a little girl standing on the dock, calling out for her mom. I told Sheila to get off my boat, and I wasn't exactly polite about it. But instead of leaving, Sheila pulled out a pair of handcuffs and locked herself to one of the mooring points. She looked me in the eyes and said, "Daryl, I know you're furious with me, but Karen needs your help. She'll die without a kidney. Please don't let your anger at me hurt her. I know you're upset, but you're a better person than that." For a moment, I just stared at her, and then I burst out laughing. "Oh, so now you think I'm a good man? I'm only good enough when you need something from me, huh? But I wasn't good enough for you to stay with." From the dock, the little girl screamed, "Mommy!" Sheila shouted back, "It's okay, honey. Mommy's fixing things." A dark laugh bubbled up inside me, and without saying another word, I pushed the throttle forward. "Daryl, what are you doing?" Sheila yelled. "I'm heading to Bermuda," I replied casually. "I plan to make a stop in St. Thomas first. Thanks for tagging along. I see you packed light." "But what about Karen?" she pleaded. "And who's Karen exactly?" I asked, acting clueless. "I don't know anyone by that name. I've never met a Karen. I never got to fix her bike or kiss her goodnight." "She's your daughter!" Sheila shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "Funny, I don't recognize her," I shot back. "You see, I remember my kids because I was there to raise them. Though judging by how they turned out, I didn't do the best job. I'll chalk that up to your influence." Sheila, clearly distressed, asked, "What do you want?" By this time, we had made it into the channel and were heading out toward open sea. I noticed that a few more people had gathered on the dock with the little girl. I couldn't see clearly, but I guessed it was my old family. I waved at them with a bit of irony. "Daryl, you need to turn back," Sheila begged, panic in her voice. I grabbed my Android and started fiddling with it, trying to get the voice recorder app up and running. Of course, I hadn't bothered to read the manual for something as trivial as that, so it took me a few minutes to figure it out. Meanwhile, Sheila was in the background, talking nonstop. "Daryl, are you even paying attention to me?" she asked, clearly frustrated. "I think I finally got the app to work." "Not really. Could you say that again?" I replied, more out of habit than actual interest. "Daryl, we need to talk about saving Karen's life. Didn't you see how she barely made it to the end of the pier?" Sheila pleaded. "Sheila, unlock yourself and get off my boat," I said, though by now we were nearly 2 miles away from the dock. It was more of a formality at this point. She just smiled and said, "We can't do that. Jason has the only key, and he's back at the dock, so you have a choice. Either go back and help my daughter, or—" "I like the sound of or," I interrupted as I pushed the throttle to pick up speed. Honestly, I was in a bit of a dilemma. On one hand, I really wanted Sheila off my boat. On the other hand, I wasn't in the mood to be guilt-tripped or pressured by a bunch of people who had abandoned me and pushed me out of their lives. If I cut off her hand, I'd probably get in trouble, and it would make a mess on my deck. If I chopped the mooring point, it would damage the boat, which I didn't like either. Plus, I didn't think she was worth the $1,500 a life raft would cost. While she kept talking, I was still weighing the cost of my peace and quiet against the expense of a lifeboat. But then, my daydreaming was abruptly interrupted by the Coast Guard showing up. Being someone who generally follows the rules, I decided to stop the boat. I mean, it's not like I had much of a choice. They had a chain gun mounted on their bow, for crying out loud. They sent over a Zodiac raft filled with a bunch of serious-looking guys in uniform. I quickly stashed my Android in a storage bin under some charts in the deckhouse. Without even asking, they all climbed aboard my boat. The guy in charge asked, "What's going on here?" Before I could say anything, Sheila jumped in with, "Thank God you're here! He's kidnapping me!" She even rattled her handcuffs at them for effect. The officer looked at me and asked, "Sir, is this true?" "Honestly, I'm pretty glad you're here too," I replied. "If we can figure out how to get her off my boat, you can take her with you. And no, I didn't kidnap her." The officer sighed. "Sir, it would be a lot easier if you just gave us the keys and explained what's happening." "I don't have the keys," I said, feeling more frustrated by the second. "This crazy woman jumped on my boat and handcuffed herself to—" I trailed off as I saw the look on their faces and realized how ridiculous my story sounded. Without another word, I turned around and offered my wrists for the cuffs. And let me tell you, those cuffs hurt when they slap them on. These boarding team guys live for this kind of stuff, just like SWAT teams. I'm pretty sure one of them got a little too excited. At least they didn't slam my face into the deck. Being treated like a kidnapper made me feel like a celebrity. I did make sure they searched me to prove I didn't have the keys. But my day wasn't over in terms of humiliation. The bosun's mate in charge had one of his men grab a screwdriver and release Sheila by unscrewing the mooring point from the deck. Why didn't I think of that? Sheila just sat there, smirking at me. "Now you have to come back," she said smugly. "You're going to regret this," I muttered. Not my most original line, but I was feeling pretty lousy at the moment. There were a ton of questions thrown my way, but I decided to lawyer up and was taken into custody. The arraignment was coming up fairly quickly when I got a visit from someone I fully expected. Sheila walked in and said, "Look, let's just move past all of this. If you donate your kidney, we can go back to our lives. You'll have done an amazing, heroic thing. My daughter will survive. And maybe we can see this as a chance to reconnect. I know we treated you really badly, but maybe—" She nervously licked her lips and squeezed her husband's hand. "Maybe we could even invite you over for Christmas?" She looked at him, and he nodded with that smug, condescending attitude. It was interesting to see how suddenly one of my organs made me a bit less of an outcast in their eyes. I couldn't help but think that if I offered up my testicles, maybe they'd even consider inviting me to Thanksgiving. "Here's an idea," I said. "How about we wait until my trial? You know how long that could take? No judge is going to force me to give up a kidney while I'm in jail. Enjoy your night, unless, of course, I just plead guilty to a lesser charge. Wonder if I'd get 7 years." Their faces turned pale as I got up to leave, and they started pounding on the glass partition, desperate for me to reconsider. Oddly enough, I had a lawyer in no time. "Hello, Mr. Gibson. I'm Matthew Hughes, and I'll be representing you." "Oh, so are you a public defender?" I asked, a bit suspicious. No, he replied. "Mr. and Mrs. Woods are covering my fees." "Right, but are you my lawyer or theirs?" "Well, that's a bit of a complicated issue," he said, trying to sound diplomatic. "Not really," I shot back. "If you're my lawyer, I want a notarized letter confirming that you represent me. Also, I'm not agreeing to your representation unless those two idiots prepay you a hefty retainer. I don't want to end up with you quitting halfway through because they decided not to foot the bill anymore." He thought it over for just a moment. "That works. It's a tricky situation they've put me in, but this might clear up the ethical concerns." I couldn't help but think that the promise of a big retainer played just as much a role in his decision as his ethics did. Maybe I'm being too cynical, but it crossed my mind. "You'll have the paperwork by tomorrow," he said. The night before I was set to be released on bail, and no, I didn't have to pay a single cent, I found myself in my cell, reflecting deeply on who I was and the kind of person I wanted to become. Was I the type of person who could just walk away while someone was in desperate need? I didn't like to think so. But when it came to my family, well, my ex-family, the anger I felt seemed to overshadow any sense of morality. Sheila was right about that. At the same time, it was clear that my family was the kind to abandon someone. When I was the one struggling, they all turned their backs on me. I mean, I wasn't literally drowning, but emotionally, I was struggling to keep my head above water. Despite everything, I knew I could still find some happiness. I just hadn't managed to do so yet. And I recognized that this was a weakness in my character. They would keep pressing me to do the right thing, and I didn't have a solid defense. Was a relatively simple medical procedure worth my daughter's life? I quickly corrected myself. No, not my daughter. As far as our connection went, I was nothing more than a donor, like a cup of sperm from a sperm bank. For a brief moment, I considered the idea of forcing some sort of interaction. After all, she was technically my blood. I could potentially push for visitation rights. I quickly let go of that idea. Even if I found a judge who would agree to it, she would still be stuck in that toxic environment and she'd probably end up resenting me. Then I thought about taking her away from that mess entirely. I could adopt her, take her on adventures around the world with me. It seemed like it would be in her best interest. I started thinking through the details. There was that small cabin next to the master cabin. I could clear out some of my old stuff and make it hers. But then I started to consider all the practicalities. Buying life jackets, cooking for two, not being able to lounge around in my underwear anymore. What if she fell overboard? She seemed like a curious kid, and I could easily get distracted. And what about her education? Would I have to homeschool her? Could I even do that from a boat? It would take up a lot of time I currently enjoyed spending fishing and doing other things. Then there was the issue of friends. How could she make friends living on a boat? No, I'd probably have to give up the boat altogether. And then I'd just be a single dad with a girl torn away from her family. If someone did that to me, I'd definitely be resentful. Besides, I didn't have the money to outdo the bribes Sheila's husband could offer. Living on a boat would probably get old pretty fast for a little girl. I sighed. I'd need to give this a lot more thought. As I was leaving with my lawyer, they ambushed me right outside the federal holding facility. "Daryl, we need to talk." Mr. Hughes, my lawyer, quickly stepped back inside the facility, leaving me to deal with them. "Talk? I'm dealing with a federal offense here. I'm not even supposed to be near you since I supposedly kidnapped you. The FBI's involved now, and this is on my record." She blushed as she stood there with Jason and Kimberly. "Dad? I told you before you lost the right to call me Dad a long time ago." "Fine. Mr. Gibson," Jason corrected himself. "Karen is getting worse. She's on dialysis now. You need to help her right away. I have to go to court. I have to pay taxes. I might even have to die someday. And just so you know, I tore up my organ donor card and added a clause to my will stating that I'm to be cremated intact, with no organs harvested, just in case." When I said this, all three of them looked horrified, but I could also see a hint of guilt in their expressions. People like to think they're moral, but desperate times can lead to desperate actions. "How could you even think we'd do something like that?" Kimberly asked, clearly offended. "History," I replied. "You've taken sides before, and I know exactly which side you chose." Sheila tried to step in with a more serious tone. "Look, there's a lot of bad history between us. I treated you badly, okay? I'm sorry. I'll regret what I did for the rest of my life. But it's done. Karen didn't do anything to you, so we all need to act like adults and do what's best for Karen. You know, when people say, 'let's all act like adults,' what they usually mean is, 'please ignore all the terrible things I did to you.'" She started to respond, but I gestured for her to stop, as Mr. Hughes reappeared with a couple of officers. One of the officers stepped forward and said, "Ma'am, I'm afraid I have to place you under arrest." "What? Why?" Sheila looked at me, confused and panicked. "Daryl, what's going on?" "I believe the official charge is making a false statement to law enforcement. Maybe they'll allow you some visitation rights to see Karen occasionally." Mr. Hughes had played a key role in getting my evidence to the right authorities. I needed to shake things up a bit. Jason started yelling at the officers, and for a moment it seemed like a fight might break out. Fortunately, Kimberly managed to calm him down, and Mr. Hughes escorted me back to my motel. Just my luck, I ran into them again at the hospital. An attractive nurse was doting on me, which was a nice change considering how things had been the past 7 years. That elusive mermaid still hadn't shown up. "Thank you so much for your generosity," she said with a smile. Kimberly and Sheila just stared at me, then suddenly broke into smiles and rushed toward me. Startled, I quickly stepped behind the nurse for cover. "Mrs. Woods! Miss Gibson! How are you?" the nurse gushed, clearly excited. "Mr. Gibson." She paused for a moment, seeming to think. Mr. Gibson here just registered himself as a potential kidney donor." She looked between my daughter and me, clearly puzzled. "Are you related, or is this just a coincidence?" "Yes," Kimberly answered at the same time I said, "No." Kimberly's smile vanished instantly, and the nurse looked even more confused. "Well, I'll just finish up the paperwork," she said awkwardly, before hurrying away. "This is such a generous thing you're doing," Sheila said, clearly not picking up on the tension. She was desperate, focused only on her daughter. "I'll make sure everyone knows just how big-hearted you are," Kimberly whimpered when she saw the look on my face. "Not really. Thanks to some heavy moral pressure, I'm going to end up losing a kidney no matter what. That is, if I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror. So, I guess I have to save someone's life." "And you can! You will!" Sheila exclaimed. "What makes you so sure it'll be Karen?" I responded bluntly. "What? But you'll be a match. I know you will." "Yes, but there could be others who match too." "But why would you help strangers?" She stopped herself, her eyes narrowing. "Because strangers might actually be grateful. Strangers might actually appreciate me saving their loved one's life, instead of acting like I owe them because of some past connection. It would be poetic justice if my kidney went to another little girl. Honestly, I'd prefer to save a dad. A hardworking, blue-collar dad with a family that values him. That's the kind of family I'd like to help." Kimberly covered her mouth and ran off. Sheila, clearly upset, asked, "Why are you acting like this? When did you turn into such an asshole? I thought I knew you." "You know what? You cheated on me for 3 years, hit me with a surprise divorce, turned my kids against me, and I just walked away. Sure, I was angry, but I walked away. You dragged me back into your life. You keep making your problems my problems. You got me arrested. You abandoned me. You took me away from my daughter. So now you don't get to have any say about who I am and what I've become. You want me to help? Fine. Have the entire Woods clan show up the day after tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp. Every single one of them. If anyone's missing, I walk. And make sure you get all the releases signed so that if we come to an agreement, there's no waiting around for it to happen." I pulled an envelope from my pocket. "Kimberly has a doctor's appointment today. She needs to be there. This is a personal letter." "What kind of games are you playing?" she started to ask. "You'll find out the day after tomorrow," I said, as I turned and walked away. I sat at the conference table, feeling my stomach grumble. Mr. Hughes was seated beside me, along with a notary. I had considered using a video camera to record the meeting, but decided against it at the last minute, following my lawyer's advice. We had received word from the DA that the charges against both Sheila and me had been dropped. We were also advised not to involve the criminal justice system in our domestic disputes, which I found strange since I was clearly the victim in all of this. Sheila had been officially warned. Then they all came in, looking like a sorry bunch. Jeff Woods, now over 40, and still a mystery to me why he married my ex-wife. Sheila, the one who caused all this mess, sat beside him, and they held hands across the table from me. Mike walked in next. I was surprised he wasn't deployed somewhere, but maybe he was on emergency family leave. His hair was cut high and tight, just like a proper naval aviator. Jason was there too. Finally, Kimberly came in last, arriving late and avoiding eye contact with me. "I want you all to know right from the start that the doctors have found not just one, but 2 matches for my kidney. One of them is an excellent match, and the other is pretty good." I lied, letting that information sink in for a moment. "The doctors are really annoyed that I'm insisting on deciding who gets my kidney. They think it should be purely a medical decision. But I believe it's better to give someone else at least a good chance." "Why are you being such a hard ass, Daryl?" Jeff Woods asked. "First of all, you can call me Mr. Gibson, and I have nothing to say to you right now," I replied firmly. "All of you expect me to give up a part of myself and hand it over to someone I hardly know. You're trying to pressure me into making a huge sacrifice. Well, you've pushed me to this point, and yes, someone is going to get a kidney. But it doesn't have to be your little sister. So, if you're here to tell me to do the right thing and save a life, guess what? I'm already doing that. Since I'm willing to make this sacrifice for a stranger, now it's your turn." "Is this about money?" Woods asked. Money? Just be quiet and let the former family talk. I couldn't believe this guy. First off, I want a divorce. When I saw their shocked expressions, I held up my hand to stop them. I don't mean from her, I said, gesturing toward Sheila. I mean from the three of you. What do you mean by divorce? Mike asked, confused. Even though there's no legal way to do this, you've all been huge disappointments to me. You haven't called, written, or reached out in any way until you needed something from me again. I could tolerate that before, but now you've crossed the line, and I want out. There's just one last thing all three of you have that I want back. Huh? Jason mumbled, clearly not following. My name. She's a Woods now, I said, pointing at Sheila. I want all three of you to change your last names to something else. Hughes began handing out the forms. Honestly, I don't care what name you choose, though I suspect it'll be Woods. If I might suggest something, Jason, I think Arnold would be a fitting last name for you. Jason's middle name was Benedict. If signing this gets Karen a kidney, I'll do it, Michael said as he immediately started signing the papers. You've turned into a real jerk, Dad. Since you're willing to make a sacrifice, why not start with something more personal? The rest of you, give Michael and me a moment alone. Confused, the others slowly left the room. Kimberly placed a sympathetic hand on Michael's shoulder as she left, sensing what was about to happen. Michael, however, looked puzzled. Once they were all gone, he turned to me with a glare. You always taught me to do the right thing. I guess those were just empty words to you. Given how poorly you seem to have learned those lessons, I must have been a lousy teacher. People get divorced. It happens. Sometimes bad stuff happens, and you just have to suck it up. Tough guy. His time in the military hadn't done much to improve his temper or attitude. I'm glad you feel that way. Bad stuff does happen, and it often comes from the actions of others. It's good to know that karma is just around the corner. Friends and family are supposed to look out for each other. So, how do you square your military teamwork attitude with what happened to me? Mom asked us not to get involved. How considerate. So if a fellow officer asked you to do something immoral and wrong, you just go along with it. I opened my briefcase and took out a vial, a mirror, and a razor blade. Let's play a little game of don't ask, don't tell. I poured out a small amount of white powder onto the mirror and cut it into lines. Here. And what do you expect me to do with that? I assume it's wire powder. Assume whatever you want. It's the price you pay for my kidney. He flipped the mirror over, scattering the powder across the polished surface. Screw you. I'm not doing it. I don't believe you'd actually let her die. You'd be surprised at what I'm capable of these days, I replied calmly. The guilt is on you. See, I'm going to save a life. But you're the one choosing not to help your sister, which is your decision to make. Honestly, it doesn't shock me, knowing how much family loyalty means to you. She's not wealthy and she can't offer you anything in return. He looked like he was ready to jump across the table at me. Screw you! I love my sister, but I'm not ruining my career when I don't have to. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to go from the ranks to flight officer? Yes, about a third of the time I spent trying to keep a family and marriage together. Go ahead, cry me a river, tough guy. Just give her the kidney. Why are you making this so damn hard? Why are you trying to hurt us? I just stared at him as he looked down at the powder spilled on the table. You're kind of a joke, you know that? Here you are, this big, tough fighter pilot. Have you ever really thought about what that means? It means you're supposed to get in that jet and put your life on the line for a bunch of people back home that you don't even know. You're supposed to be willing to die whenever others need you to. No, I don't think that part of the job ever crossed your mind. You think it's just about taking out the bad guys, because you can't even risk a sacrifice for someone you actually know. I guess it's all about the uniform and picking up girls, having people tell you how great you are. Screw you. Mom was right to leave you. Maybe, maybe not. But me, I'm going to save a life. You, Mr. Big Bad Fighter Pilot, now you get to make the tough call. You might have thought it would be something like shooting down an airliner or starting a war. Nope. Your real challenge is deciding whether a little girl lives or dies when you have the power to do something about it. No cheering crowds, no fellow officers patting you on the back or feeling sorry for you. Just a simple act for someone other than yourself, you selfish jerk. But the family will know. They'll know you had a choice and chose to back out, because you care more about your fancy uniform than your sister. Tell me, when she was little, just 2 years old and learning to talk, what did she call you? I saw the crack in his resolve. Mickey. She called me Mickey. Hand me your damn poison. I'll do it. He motioned toward the half-empty vial. No, I replied, giving him the coldest stare I could. Now you can lick it off the table. Jason walked in alone, just as I'd asked, with a cautious expression. He had seen Michael after he left. Sit down, I instructed. You know, you're the biggest disappointment to me. You had a wife and kids when you did this to me. You should have known better if you really loved them. I paused. You do love them, don't you? I didn't want to assume. Yes, he spat out. So, you have some idea of how I felt. Or at least you should. Dad! He corrected himself quickly under my glare. Mr. Gibson, Mom was unhappy. She'd been unhappy for years. I placed the envelope on the table and slid it back and forth between my hands, watching his eyes track its movement. So, were those the years she was sneaking around with Jeff Woods behind my back? Or was it even earlier than that? Did she ever let me know she was unhappy? Sure, I noticed she seemed off for a few months, but she never said a word. Wouldn't you want Pamela to tell you if she was unhappy? Or if she didn't have the courage, wouldn't you hope your kids might give you a heads up before you got blindsided? If your wife was seeing someone while you were away, wouldn't you want your son to clue you in? What do you want from me? An apology? I already said I was sorry. I'm still sorry. Yeah, you're sorry, but an apology is just words. I flicked the envelope with my finger, sending it spinning across the table. It caught a bit of air as it hit a stray breeze and landed in front of him. That's what I want from you. He opened the envelope cautiously. Inside was a key card with the Quality Inn logo on it. What's this? It's for a hotel room, room 341. Inside, there's a nice, attractive young lady, disease-free, who's interested in meeting you. In fact, I think you should get to know her in the biblical sense. Actually, I'm insisting on it. And what's the point of this? Why are you playing these ridiculous games instead of just helping the very people who betrayed me? Let me tell you a story. There was once a young man, married, mind you, who held his father's marriage in his hands. It wasn't a perfect marriage, but it was one the father deeply valued. Like most marriages, it needed work and care. We both know how well that young man handled that responsibility. Now karma has come around, and it's my turn to have control over your marriage. If you really love your sister, you'll do whatever it takes to save her life. Even if I'm a complete jerk and decide to send the video, he flinched at that, to Pamela. You might still be able to fix things. You could explain how I forced you into a situation with an incredibly attractive woman. That might not end your marriage, especially if it's built on trust and honesty. Does she trust you? Does she take your word seriously? You might be able to patch things up, but it'll never be the same. Just like I'm not the same. You should enjoy it, though. Think of it as a belated birthday present. A thought crossed my mind at the last moment. Oh, hand over your cell phone. You see, I only rented. Is rented the right term? No, hired. Yes, I only hired her for 3 hours. And to give you a little extra motivation, since the charges against me have been dropped, I've got my boat back. So, how much do you value your sister's life? I leaned back and let the cursing begin. After he started to calm down, I glanced at my watch. You've got 2 hours and 25 minutes left. Send in Kimberly. And don't forget to leave your cell phone. Kimberly walked in, looking like a beaten dog. Dad, Mr. Gibson, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never really put myself in your shoes. You were always the strong one, the one who disciplined us and took the hard hits. She almost choked on her words, in stride. We thought you'd get over it quickly, and you seemed to. Then you started yelling and disappeared, and I just assumed you hated us. You got that last part right, I replied. She flinched. But I didn't think it would hurt you, not like that. It did, and it still does. Do you know what the worst part of this whole situation is for me? She shook her head. It's that you came back. Not because you were sorry, not because you missed me, not because you realized you were wrong, but because you had to. She sat there, staring down at her hands. Is that why you scheduled the doctor's appointment for me to get an Essure implant? Essure was a permanent sterilization procedure. It involved placing 2 plugs in the fallopian tubes, causing scarring that prevented eggs from reaching the uterus. You took my future away from me, I said. That's not true, she whispered. Not technically, no. But you did take a future away from me. So I'm just taking a future away from you. You'll still meet someone, fall in love, have a career, hobbies, joys, and friends. Just no children, she sobbed. No, maybe this will help you appreciate family a bit more. Maybe Karen can be your surrogate daughter. She sat there quietly, still avoiding eye contact and staring at her hands. So that's what this is all about. Sacrifice. When the doctor explained the procedure, I felt numb. She told me I had to wait 3 days to be sure I was serious about it. The doctor also said that I needed a family member or someone I loved to drive me home afterward. Finally, she looked up at me, her face void of any emotion, just a mask of the girl I once knew. I chose you instead. Father, I wish you would take this burden from me, but your will, not mine, be done. The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. Sheila was waiting for me outside the room after Kimberly left, looking like a shell of herself. Are you happy with yourself, tearing apart your own family? She asked, dripping with venom. Excuse me, I was on my boat heading to Bermuda. 7 years ago, I was thrown out of this family when every single one of you turned against me. And that justifies treating your own children so horribly? They aren't my children anymore. You made sure of that. Clearly, I failed as a father if they were capable of doing what they did to me. But I don't think they'll forget this lesson. Not one bit. So this is just revenge? Call it whatever you want. A wave of exhaustion suddenly hit me. The day had been incredibly draining, and I knew it wasn't over yet. Do you mind? I'm tired. Being an asshole takes a lot out of you. And it truly did. So, is it our turn now? She asked, glaring at me. Sure, let's finish this up. Right on cue, Jimmy Boy walked in with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Sheila, and she blew on it before giving him a smile that twisted the knife in my gut. She had built an entire life without me. Mr. Hughes entered the room as well, accompanied by the notary. He placed his folders down and took a seat next to me. This was my moment. Do you want to know the difference between you and me, Sheila? She took a sip of her coffee. I have a soul? Nice. You still have that sharp wit, I see. No sense of shame, but a soul. No. I was going to say that you still have all your good memories. You made your choices, had the kids, and everything turned out just fine for you. Meanwhile, all our shared memories were trashed for me. I had to question everything about my relationships with all of you. You had Kimberly, Jason, and Michael standing by your side. I was left out in the cold. Daryl, how many times do I have to say I'm sorry? The last few years of our marriage weren't filled with many happy memories for me. No, you were saving all your happiness for Jimmy Boy. Didn't bother to save any for me. You moved from one set of happy memories to another. I noticed Jeff wanted to say something, but he kept quiet, clenching his jaw. Maybe he was finally learning to keep his mouth shut. It doesn't matter. I can tell from the looks on our kids' faces that you're planning something awful. So let's get it over with, shall we? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Jeff, how's my wife? Enjoying your time with her? He stayed silent, just waiting. You know why people are drawn to married folks? If someone's even a little attractive, they catch the eye of single people. You're a prime example, Jeff. It's because marriage smooths out the rough edges. People are like rocks in that way. I'd already done the work with Sheila, and you decided to take her, Jeff. That's theft. You saw something nice and you took it. Are you saying you want her back? Jeff asked, clearly shocked. Oh no. It's like a piece of chewing gum. Once someone else has chewed it, you don't exactly want it back. Why would I want a faithless and deceptive woman back? Sheila went pale at that, but she stayed quiet. Just something to keep in mind for the future. I doubt she's got another 25 years in her, but in about 14. Just a heads up. Been there, done that. Are the insults part of the deal? He asked. No, those are on the house. But back to my point. You didn't just take my wife. You took my entire life. Everything I had, everything I expected, past, present, future. You turned my whole world upside down, and you didn't even bother to ask. I grabbed the 2 folders from Mr. Hughes. These are quitclaim deeds. One is for your house. You sign it over to me. Hughes cut in. He prepared these in case you felt like giving him a gift. I smiled and nodded in agreement. The other document is a quitclaim deed for all your belongings. What's chattel? Sheila asked. Hughes clarified. That means everything in your house. You're signing over all the contents of your home, your boat, and your cars to him? I continued. Your clothes, including the anniversary lingerie you bought, the box with the baby outfits, the photo albums, the trophies and diplomas, Sheila, even your grandmother's cast iron frying pan, your favorite book, the bed where you made sweet love, the backyard where you entertained all your friends, all of it. I want it all. Here's how it works. You sign, we file the paperwork while you stay here, and you hand over the keys to everything. A PI will watch the house and take video to make sure you don't sneak in and steal any of my stuff. I'm not heartless. I'll let you pack 1 suitcase each, including Karen's, with clothes and any legal documents you need like birth certificates and passports, but no marriage licenses. I've got plans for that little document. So this is about money, Woods scoffed. Did I ask for your 401k? Did I mention your stocks or cash? No, this is about your memories. This is your life. You took my life, so now I'm taking yours. Sheila had a focused look on her face as this conversation unfolded. Without a word, she opened her purse, took out a pen, and asked, "Where do I sign?" Hughes's assistant had already marked the spots with sticky notes, and Sheila began signing and dating the documents. "Wait!" Jeff exclaimed. "He can't do this. Selling a kidney is illegal." "This isn't a sale. We're making no promises," Hughes replied, giving me a look of disgust. I think some lawyers take on sleazy clients just to feel morally superior once in a while. "This is a simple request without any quid pro quo. Consider it restitution for past grievances." "And what if we report this to the police?" Jeff blustered. "Don't be an idiot, Jim," Sheila snapped. "If you do that, he won't be able to donate the kidney, or he'll end up in jail and Karen will die. We already tried that route once." She shot me a look of disgust. "This time it's our turn to be on the receiving end. The price is too high. We need to negotiate." "I'm open to it," I cut in. "What's the going rate for a little girl's life? Just curious." I tapped the file folders with my finger. "But I know what my price is." "Jim, sign the papers. I've had that house for 15 years. It has everything I've worked for my whole life. It's just a house. It's everything we have." "I know, and it hurts. It hurts a lot. All her birthday pictures, all her clothes, my things, my jewelry." Sheila looked at me, reached behind her neck, took off her gold chain, and slammed it onto the paper. "Here." She began twisting the rings off her fingers. "Do you want my wedding rings too?" I waved my hand dismissively at her. "No, I'm good. I know exactly how much those things mean to you." She actually growled at me. Jeff grabbed her by the head, turning her to face him. "Sheila, listen to me. He's just playing messed up games. He's not really going to go through with this. We can't show weakness now. He's just trying to tear us apart." "Thank you, Captain Obvious. But what can we do about it?" "We can wait. We can hope he grows a conscience. We can try to find another match. We can't just throw everything away over this." "You're not throwing everything away," I cut in. "You still have your health, you still have each other, and you still have that oh-so-lucrative job you used to lure my wife into adultery." Sheila blushed and looked away in shame. "So you'll be fine. Just the stuff will be gone." "No deal," Jeff shouted at me. "You need to come up with another price. Sheila, he's bluffing. He's bluffing," he yelled at me. "Jim, he was sailing to Bermuda. He's filled with hate and spite. Jim, we can't take that chance with our daughter." "She's not," he started, but then he stopped, leaving the sentence unfinished. "I don't know what you were going to say, but don't say it." Her voice was precise, but her face showed how shaken she was. She turned to me with eyes full of hate. "I hope you're satisfied," I sighed. "Yes and no. For years, I convinced myself that you were just a soulless tramp who threw everything away for some money and a younger guy. But that also meant believing that the woman I thought I knew for 24 years was a complete lie, and that I was a fool. It made me think you were just pretending all along. But when you picked up that pen and signed away everything, it reminded me of the woman I married, the one who made the right choices and truly cared about her family. It showed me that my judgment wasn't entirely wrong. So if there's even a piece of that Sheila left, maybe I share some of the blame. But just a piece. When it really mattered, you didn't give me a chance to fight for my family. That doesn't change the fact that when it came down to choosing between stuff, I said with contempt, and family, you made the right choice. The only good choice. But you need to live with the fact that you denied me that same choice. I didn't care about the house, the car, or half of the retirement fund. What I wanted was my family, and I wasn't given the chance to keep them because of you. I glanced at my watch. This has been enlightening, and it seems like you two have a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, your other daughter has an appointment, and now I have to drive her to it. Mr. Hughes can take care of things from here. My work here was done with those 2 words from Jeff Woods. The drive was silent. My mind kept replaying that last encounter. I realized that Sheila wasn't completely heartless. She was willing to make a tough decision for her daughter. But then I questioned myself. Was I just a hate-filled monster? Was I trying to get even, teach them a lesson, exorcise my demons, or simply indulging in some twisted form of sadism? Unfortunately, there was room for all 4 theories, and only 2 of those motives were remotely justifiable. As we headed to the doctor's office, my phone beeped with a text. Jason had paid his price, and apparently he was crying like a little child. I sighed and remembered the days after the divorce. He had 7 years of regret ahead of him before we could even come close to being even. I steeled myself. The doctor's office was a typical OB/GYN setup. Magazines about pregnancy were scattered around, and pictures of mothers holding adorable babies adorned the walls. The place was nicely decorated, with a corner set aside for children's toys. Naturally, there were pregnant women in the waiting room. Kimberly looked tense, her eyes darting around, trying to find a safe place to rest. Eventually, she just closed her eyes and curled up in her seat. I could hear her whispering to herself, "I'm doing this for Karen. I'm doing this for Karen. I'm doing this for Karen." Her knuckles were clenched so tightly they turned white. Memories I had avoided for 7 years suddenly flooded back. Kimberly used to love dolls and played with them until she was 13. In her teens, she transitioned to collecting artistic China dolls. I remembered when she broke up with Gary Dodson. He seemed like a nice boy, but when I asked her about it, she simply said, "He's not nice to kids." I also remembered the way she used to smile at me with that special daddy's girl smile. This was going to be unbearable for her. "Kimberly Gibson!" the receptionist called out. Her hand clenched mine so tightly I could feel my bones grinding together. In a low, urgent voice, she said, Promise me you'll keep your word. Swear to me that this will erase all the pain I've caused you. Tell me that this isn't all for nothing. I don't care what the others do, just swear to me that this is the end of it. Please, just tell me I'm a good girl, Daddy." She broke down and started to cry. The receptionist watched for a moment, then quickly picked up the phone. I felt torn, unsure of what to do. I grabbed her hand with both of mine. "What's going on here?" a woman in a white doctor's coat shouted as she walked in. She saw my pale face and my daughter, who likely looked even worse. "I was told she had already made this decision. I'm not going to operate on her. Not in this state. Until I get a psychological profile from a psychologist stating she's mentally sound, we're done here." "Of course. Send me the bill," I replied in a gravelly voice as I helped Kimberly to her feet. "No!" Kimberly screamed. "You have to do it! My sister, don't! You need to do it!" she cried, nearly hysterical. I gently pulled her toward the door while the doctor muttered something about calling security. "Daddy, this isn't my fault. I'm sorry. We can find another doctor. I swear I'll do it. Just give me some time." Shh, I soothed her, feeling utterly broken. "You know the thing about sacrifice?" I barely managed to say. "Sometimes it's enough just to be willing to do the hard thing you've paid in full." In the car, she finally stopped crying. "What now?" she asked in a dull tone. "Now I head to the hospital." There was no outburst of happiness, no smiles or joy. It seemed like neither of us had any emotion left to give. Moving like an old woman, she reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. "Here, these are the name change forms." I filled them out and filed them before coming to the doctor's office. I don't deserve to be your daughter, and honestly, right now, I don't want to be your daughter. I took that in, and I couldn't blame her. "I deeply regret not taking you out of that doctor's office before the doctor refused to help us. You have no reason to believe me, but I was wrong." "And yet we still have the scars," she replied. "Yes, scars, reminders of lessons learned. This is your second chance. When you have your own kids, make sure you raise them right. Make sure they don't repeat the mistakes we made. Start fresh. Help your kids do better than we did." We drove forward into whatever the future held. Epilogue. I was sitting in a cafe in St. Martin. That elusive mermaid still hadn't shown up, even after 10 years of searching. Still, I looked up and down the French beach. There were other consolations. An angry young man sat down across from me uninvited. "What can I do for you, son?" I asked calmly. "I'm not your son." "No, you're not. I remember my boys. They turned out to be mostly good men, I suppose. Made some big mistakes, but they paid for them. In the end, they figured out what really matters, and that's all anyone can do. Want a drink?" "No, you're a hard man to track down." He continued to glare at me, but then his gaze shifted to more of an assessment rather than an accusation. "So, who's looking for me?" "My name is Harold Weiss." He didn't offer his hand and fell silent. I extended mine instead. "Okay, Mr. Weiss. You obviously know who I am, though I'm not sure how. So, how can I help you?" He hesitated at first, but then finally shook my hand. "I need a favor, a big one, and only you can do it. Mr. Weiss, I've never seen you before in my life. Maybe you should start by telling me your story." He sighed and motioned for the waiter, waiting until his drink arrived. "This is just too strange. I expected someone more More what? More hateful. Ah, time and the whole Karen incident had burned a lot of the hate and bitterness out of me. He gathered his thoughts when I didn't respond. I married Kimberly Arnold. You probably remember her as Kimberly Gibson. I knew her by both names. She showed me the name change forms, though I never really thought of her as an Arnold. Kimberly disappeared after I donated the kidney. In fact, I did it on the same day I confronted the family. Eventually, Sheila pressured Jeff into signing the forms, although judging by their faces, it must have been an ugly fight. Sheila believed Kimberly might have gone off to harm herself, but I didn't think so. I figured she was working through a lot of issues. Yes, I stayed in their house while I recovered. For the first 3 days, a nurse looked after me, and I spent my time snooping into the lives of strangers. They seemed happy in the photos, but it was clear I wasn't part of that life. Once I started feeling better, I spent my time going through their files. Any photo of Mr. and Mrs. Woods went straight into the fireplace. If the photo included Karen, I left it alone. Any picture of a relative I didn't recognize got destroyed. I burned all of his trophies, diplomas, toys, and her frilly undergarments, reducing them to ash and twisted metal. Apparently, Mr. Woods used to be quite the high school baseball player. I thought about destroying all of her clothes too. But two things stopped me. First, I remembered my mother. Her church dress, apron, and visiting suit were major memories for me. Second, there was a picture at the bottom of her dresser. It was of the 5 of us at Disney World, back when we were a happy family. I spared the clothes in honor of my mother and for Karen. I spent the rest of the month thinking about the future while finishing off their cases of wine and a special bottle of 25-year-old Lafroig in a wooden case. Honestly, it just tasted like scotch to me. When I needed some cash, I pawned one of her pieces of jewelry. I wasn't about to touch my own savings. His clothes, both cars, her remaining jewelry, and a few heirlooms I knew she cherished were donated to the National Kidney Foundation. I left the receipts on the kitchen table. This wasn't about money. I decided I wouldn't ruin the life of a little girl who had done nothing wrong except be related to the wrong people. When I noticed her swing in the yard, I saw a small gap in the bushes. There was a tiny headstone with Frodo scratched on it, surrounded by a circle of rocks and a withered flower. No, burning this place to the ground might have been an option if it were just Sheila and Jeff. But that little memorial was a gift I could give to a daughter I'd never get to know. So I called Hughes and had him reverse the paperwork. Why did I wait a month? Well, I wanted them to go through the hassle of setting up a new household, making deposits, buying furniture, and getting new appliances. Sure, it was petty by then, but while Kimberly and Sheila had shown some level of remorse, I felt like Jeff deserved a little something extra, and recovery takes time. Since Sheila had proven she still had some sensitivity left, I left her little notes. In their photo albums, I wrote, "She's a beautiful girl. Too bad I never knew her." I also tucked a few other notes where she'd find them over the years. But in the end, I was finished with this family. Again. Illness, moving, and even a fire. All these things put a strain on a marriage. They experienced the equivalent of all 3 at once. Let's see if good old Jeff could keep things together when the storm hits, not just when the sun is shining. I wished him no luck at all. Now, I had this young man I'd never met before asking me for a favor. Kim was in therapy for a long time. He shot another glare my way. "She's better now. She said you were the toughest son of a witch on the planet." He waited for me to respond, but I didn't. Anyway, when we started dating, she made sure I understood the meaning of sacrifice. He watched me again, but I still had no idea what he was getting at. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. So, she told me right away that any children we had would carry the Gibson name. It wasn't up for negotiation. "So, have you had any kids?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "Greta and Alois Gibson. She let me choose their names. He's less than a year old." And where do I fit into all this? My brother just passed away, and he didn't have any children, though he was married. I want to keep the family name going, but my wife refuses. I think you're the only person who can convince her to change her mind. You're my last hope. I thought it over as I finished my Carib lager. "Can I see your phone?" I asked. He handed it to me. "Just hold down number 1. That's her cell." I gave him an approving nod. "Good. That's how it should be." I pressed the button. It took a moment to connect. "Hi, sweetie. How are you?" Her voice was warm and affectionate. She was happy to hear from him. I remembered when someone used to feel that way about me. I tried to sound gruff, though it wasn't easy. "You still don't seem to learn your lessons very well." She gasped. "Duh, Mr. Gibson." What's going on? What lesson? How did you get this phone? She sounded stunned. The lesson was about sacrifice and grace. Your husband came down here to give me a piece of his mind about how I treated you. I think you have a good man there. It took a lot of guts to risk so much for this. Family goes both ways. Can you consider giving him the honor of passing on his family name to your children? Her tone turned light and breezy, though it felt a bit forced. You know what? I think I'll keep him. There was a brief silence. Anything else? Yes. I felt something unclench in my chest, and my voice came out hoarse. I'm sorry, and I'd like to see my grandchildren, if you'll let me. There was a long pause, almost as painful as the 7 years I'd spent in isolation. I think Gibson would make a perfectly good middle name. What do you think? Another pause followed, this one slightly less tense. When can you come? It felt like a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying suddenly lifted. Kimberly had indeed learned about sacrifice and grace. Everyone deserves a second chance, even me.